Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce to you Brian Castleman, who's going to give you official welcome. Hi, Brian. Why don't you just use that right there?
All right. Well, thank you, everybody, and welcome to our forum. I'm Brian Castleman. I'm president of the Florence Area Chamber of Commerce. I want to thank you all for coming. You know, this event is jointly sponsored between the Florence Chamber and KCST Coast Radio and the Our Town program, which Bob facilitates. We're sponsoring today's program so you can have an opportunity to hear from the candidates, be able to ask questions, and perhaps, hopefully, feel like you're better informed when you go to cast your ballots on November 4th. I want to thank our candidates for participating today, and also thank Kevin Rhodes from Florence Event Center for allowing us to hold this event here. And particularly I want to thank Bob Sneddon and KCST Coast Radio for their active participation, and Bob moderating this program. And we just thank you for your support in this. And Bob, I'm going to turn the microphone back over to you now.
All right, thank you. Just a few things. We will be taking commercial breaks throughout the afternoon and evening. I'm going to try to continue the conversation during that, so you guys don't sit around twiddling your thumbs. We have two rather lengthy breaks that are going to be about 15 or 16 minutes, but it definitely will continue conversation, and that'll be at 5 o'clock and at 6 o'clock because we have national news and local news on the station. But we will be talking almost entirely the entire time here. Teresa Baer is here with us from the SISO News, right over there. She will be chiming in with questions as well, and we're going to take care of a little behind-the-scenes stuff here. So towards the last 20 minutes of the first 2 hours, I'll look to you, and you just give me the high sign you have a question, and we'll get you in here. The way it'll work is we will let each candidate introduce themselves. Take a couple minutes to do that, and then we'll go from there. The first hour, it'll be questions from me, and I'll ask maybe some follow-up questions or clarification questions. If I restate the question and ask you to answer it again, please don't take offense. I'm just trying to understand what maybe you're saying, or maybe I didn't state the question very well the first time. Or I may ask you a follow-up question. Teresa will do the same thing. Teresa will be using that microphone behind her and speak directly into it. In the final hour, from 6 to 7, it'll be you guys asking questions. If you run out of questions, I'm sure Teresa has a list in her back pocket. But when we get to that point, we'll have you come down. We have microphones on each side of the stage, and we'll have you come down and speak directly into the microphones if you do that. And if you would, just say who you are if you're going to ask a question. And we're getting close to going on the air. Thank you all for coming, and I want to thank you guys all for coming too. It's not a real formal thing. I don't ask gotcha questions. They might ask you gotcha questions. But I have several questions that I hope will help us all understand you guys a little bit better, and maybe it'll give you something to think about too. So. Well, now I have to wait till my cue. You all have tickets to the Oktoberfest pancake breakfast. I'll do a commercial right here. I tell you what, if you buy a $10 ticket to the Oktoberfest, including the pancake feed, the Kiwanis pancake feed on Saturday, $6 of that goes to the Kiwanis Eliminate Project, which is to eliminate tetanus worldwide. And it's a real big problem for small children and mothers in certain parts of the country. We have a very gracious donor who has said she will match that $6 for each one of those. So if you pay $10 to the Oktoberfest, you're actually going to be donating $12 to eliminate. And Nan Osborne, thank you very much for your offer. Is that Nan back there? And did you know you made that offer? And good afternoon. Thanks for joining us on Our Town. We're live at the Florence Event Center this afternoon, and you can come down and join us if you like. We'll be here till 7 o'clock. I'm Bob Sneddon, and on stage with me right now are 6 candidates for Florence City Council. Joining me a little bit later in the program will be the 3 candidates for mayor, and then between 6 and 7 o'clock tonight, we will have all 9 of them on stage answering your questions. And in order to ask them questions, you're going to have to be here in the audience. Right now, I would like to introduce our 6 candidates. There are 3 positions coming up on the Florence City Council on the November 4th election. You guys didn't hear that, but I did. There is one 2-year term, and that has been vacated by Joe Henry, who has opted to run for mayor, and by city charter, Joe has to resign effective December 31st. In order to file for mayor. So he did that and created a position. 2 candidates, Ron Preisler and Clarence Lysdale, have filed for that position. If you guys could just wave right now for the folks at home. And then there are 2 4-year candidates. One of them is currently held by Sue Roberts, the other by Brian Jago. Neither of those are running again. There are 4 candidates for that. Susie Lacer, Mildred Rowley, George Liddon and Shane Burnham have each filed. So I'm just going to pick out a totally random introduction right now, and we'll start with Susie Lacer at the far end. Susie, would you just pick up the microphone? And would you just give me about a minute and a half and introduce yourself and tell us why you would like to be on the Florence City Council?
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you to the Chamber and Coast Radio for sponsoring this forum. 8 years ago, I chose to move to Florence. My spouse and I were considering several different coastal cities for job openings and selected Florence based on its location. I'm proud to be a Florence resident, and I plan to be here long term. Since moving here, I've jumped into what a friend of mine refers to as our city's extreme sport, volunteering. I currently serve on the Sayusla Library District Board and also with the Friends of the Library. I volunteer with Food Share, the city, the chamber, the school district, Master Recyclers. I served on the board of the Merchants of Old Town before that organization merged with the chamber. As a small business owner, I appreciate the challenges faced by our local companies, and I hope to help the city promote existing business expansion and also welcome new entrepreneurs to town. During my years on staff at the Port of Sayusla, I gained insight into how local governments work, as well as the constraints under which they must operate. As an elected official, I am familiar with serving on a municipal board. My time at the board, along with my service at the library, has given me a strong background in budgeting and fiscal management. My first priority will be to foster communication within the community to identify what Florence citizens want. What does the future look like? What's important to our residents? The second priority is to create a climate of opportunity for new and existing business. And a third priority would be to increase livability in Florence, to build on the amenities that we have and add fresh elements for the benefit of all citizens. Our city faces many challenges on the path to a vibrant, sustainable Florence, and I do not claim to have all of the answers, but I'm willing to devote my time and energy.
All right. Susie Lacer, thank you very much. And one of the other candidates seeking one of those 4-year terms is Shane Burnham, and they're going to jump across to Shane. So Shane, if you'd pick up and just give us about a minute and a half of a little bit about you and why you want to be city councilor.
All right. Again, thank you for putting this on to the chamber as well. My name is Shane Burnham. I've lived in Florence with my wife and my 4 kids for the past 6.5 years, coming up in 6.5 years. And I work for a telephone company here locally. Part of those responsibilities requires that I work with government agencies, universities. We provide telecommunications services. We do engineering, and then actually install these types of services. So it's kind of a high-tech industry, and my job requires a good understanding of high-tech stuff. So one of the things, you know, I see is Florence needs to have a sustainable plan. In the 6 years that I've lived here, 2 of my kids have graduated. One of them, the first one to graduate, you know, had to leave town, and there wasn't sufficient jobs here for him. And I don't like that. You know, I feel like families need to stay close. I would like to see, you know, jobs created here that are high-tech jobs, that are family wage jobs, you know, bring some economic development and some small business friendliness from the city, you know, to encourage our local citizens to invest in our community.
You don't have to take the full minute.
All right, okay. My wife and I both volunteer with a lot of youth. Just to give you some background on us, we've taken in probably 3 children that are not our own. One was a formal foster child, and in the past 6 years, and it's part of what we do. We like to serve, and I hope to serve the city of Florence.
All right, Shane Burnham, a candidate, 4-year candidate for Florence City Council, and George, we'll do you next. So if you take the microphone, George Liddon.
Thank you. And pardon me if I stand. I like to stretch my knees a little bit. George Liddon. 20 years ago, my wife and I decided, after we came through Florence on a trip, this was where we were going to retire. During that time, we have owned and operated 4 small businesses. I've been in the real estate land development, which entailed anywhere from a 500 to 1,200 tract of land that we developed into 5-acre home sites. That entailed a lot of feasibility studies, environmental impact studies, and marketing demographic studies to make sure that we could get a return on the investment. We have a lot of talent here for you folks to choose from. Our focus seems to be in common on economic development. I can bring to the table economic development expertise in that startup businesses, startup and taking to completion real estate development projects. Couple that with my background as a flight instructor for the United States Air Force, Navy veteran, and a graduate of the University of Kansas. I'm a Jayhawker, and I hope you don't hold that against me. But at any rate, I have some talent that I can bring to Florence to utilize in developing and bringing jobs to Florence so that we can realize a growth pattern that does not require taxes.
All right, George Liddon, thank you very much. And our final 4-year candidate is Dr. Mildred Rowley, and the microphone is to your right. To your right. There you go. There we go.
I assume it's on. My name is Mildred Rowley.
Yes, it's on.
And I go more by Rowley. I'm a family practice doc here at McKenzie Associates. And my background brings a scientific background. I was a PhD scientist working on Love Canal, which was really teamwork to try to help save the homes, the people, and get them compensation at that time. And I moved into medicine when I saw all the effects of this pollution on the health of people. And so for 25 years I've been in family practice medicine, and I feel that with this background I can contribute to a team member on the council. And I think it's really important for the council to work together for our goals, as Susie very readily pointed out, the sustainability for all our citizens from birth to the next stage, the end stage. I feel that if we take care of the residents, we'll take care of the tourists. It'll be one of attraction, and there won't have to be that much promotion. And I do feel that there is so much talent here, including retired talent of people who do not want to retire and have a lot to give to the community. So I think this incubator, this attraction of small businesses with what's available here, and then working with the county and the state. And as far as taxes, well, we all of us pay about maybe 1 to 2 tanks of gasoline to maintain the streets, the roads. And Florence has 88, it's its biggest infrastructure investment, 88 miles of roads to take care of. So depending what the county does and the state does for funding to help us maintain the roads for the citizens, including the pathways, bike paths, that's for our residents.
And Dr. Rowley, I'm going to jump in because we've gone over
the
minute. That's right. But
thank you so much.
I have a feeling, I'll put it back on the thing there. Thank you. I have a feeling we're going to be able to, we'll be talking quite a bit about some of those things you just brought up. Those are the 4 candidates for the 4-year term: Susie Lacer, Shane Burnham, George Liddon, and Mildred Rowley. Now there are 2 candidates seeking the 2-year term. The first one, Ron Chrysler, is the first challenger for that term. Ron, would you give us a minute and a half about yourself?
Sure. My wife and I have lived here in Florence for about 7 years. 6 years of that time I've been a hospice volunteer. The last year and a half I've served on the volunteer board. I'm president of my HOA. I've done work for Habitat. I've worked at AARP doing people's taxes. I've met an awful lot of citizens here in Florence in my role as a volunteer. I'm also a really good listener, good communicator, and I get things done. I'm a Vietnam era vet, which is also part of my work in hospice. Whenever a vet has entered into the hospice program, there are only a few of us who are challenged to go ahead and work with them during their last days. I used to be a small business owner. I've also run my own bookkeeping and payroll service. So I know what it means to have to make a payroll, to pay taxes. And I have a vision for Florence that I think is pretty unique. I've worked in a lot of different industries and been successful in them. And I think I could bring that vision and that drive here to Florence.
Ron Chrysler, thank you very much. A 2-year candidate for Florence City Council. Clarence Lysdale is the final of the 6 we're going to hear from this hour. And Clarence, would you give us about a minute and a half?
Okay, well, thanks to the station and to the chamber. I've been a 20-year resident of Florence and enjoyed every bit of it. Been fairly active in city-related programs and projects. I was for 10 years on the city's planning commission. Of course, and related to that, I was involved in defining the riparian assessment and inventory that was part of the EPA project here. I also did the city's flyer brochure on native vegetation and roadie preservation some years back. My background educationally was as an engineer, a registered professional engineer. I owned a small business co-owner of a small business for 20 plus years in the marine control field. And I've spent some time here in Florence as a math tutor, both in the middle school and the high school. In terms of what my view of the world, I think a few things that I go by are hire locally and promote from within. I've been a long-time roadie advocate, and I think that today's decisions will affect the long-term future of Florence, and I think we need to keep that in mind.
All right, Clarence Lysdale, our 6th City Council candidate on stage today. Clarence, I have just a quick follow-up question. You say you were marine control. I can't read my own handwriting.
A marine control company. We did.
You didn't control U.S. Marines.
Marine boats.
Oh, okay. All right. That's all.
Ferry boats in particular. Try to not let people get seasick.
Yeah,
that's what it's all about.
Good enough. Thank you, Clarence. Those are the 6 candidates. We'll be taking a real quick break on Coast Radio. I'm Bob Snedden. You're listening to Our Town. We're at the Florence Event Center. We are talking with the candidates for Florence City Council. We're going to take 2 minutes, and we'll be back with questions of the candidates right after this on our tab. We're talking about Florence City Council races. In the next hour, we'll have 3 candidates for Florence Mayor on stage, and then from 6 to 7, we'll have all 9 candidates, the 6 council candidates and the 3 mayor candidates. And you can ask them a question, but you have to be at the Florence Event Center to ask those questions. So you can, there's still time to join us. There's a few empty seats in the house. You can come join us. I'm going to start right off with the fuel tax election and streets and roads. And it's a 2-part question. For or against the proposed fuel tax? It's going to be on the ballot November 4th. And if you're against, do you have an alternative? And I'm going to start off with George Liddon. For or against, and if against, what's your alternative?
I have a 2-part answer.
Okay.
I'm for it, but I'm against the bond. I think we should pay as we go. The only reason I'm for the tax is because the city's kind of got themselves behind the 8 ball. We need the tax. It's going to be fair because it'll spread it out amongst all the citizens and the visitors. The city's proposing to withdraw $4 from the streetlight maintenance fee. That $4 would actually be about what we would pay if you use 100 gallons of fuel a month. So it's going to offset, it'll be a wash to the citizens. That works. What doesn't work for me is tying the citizens of this town to a $5 million bond. I realize that if you can get the money all in your hands at one time and contract out and just get the streets done, you know, all at the same time, which is not really going to happen, that would be good. The actual feasibility of that money's going to be sitting there, and I don't know if they have plans to put it in an interest-bearing account.
I want to ask you a follow-up question. So you're for the tax, but against the bond. However, the way the ballot measure is written, they have to do the bond. They cannot, if they get voter approval, they have to do the bond. So based on that, would you say vote it down, come back again with a revised proposal without the bond, or grit your teeth?
I would vote it down and just come back and rewrite.
Okay, all right, George Liddon, thank you very much. Next on the list, same question, Clarence Lysdale.
I would say that my opinion pretty much follows what George just described. I would be for the tax in terms of the amount. I don't think it's that significant or painful, I guess would be the right word, relative to gas prices and the fluctuations in gas prices. Again, I'm concerned about the bond. I don't think we should be in debt, putting people that aren't even born yet in debt, and a 20-year bond does that to some degree at least. So I'm against the bond if it means that, and I didn't read it the way that you mentioned, Bob. It wasn't clear to me that the bond was a necessary part of the vote. And looking at the council's resolution to write the language of the.
That's a fair question.
Anyway,
yeah.
To me that's a bad situation to be in, because as George said, I'm not for the bond. I'm for using the tax to generate money for streets.
All right. And whether or not it's specifically on the ballot title, the current council has been right up front and said this is what we intend to do with the money. So Clarence Lysdale, thank you very much on that. And let's go Shane Burnham. The fuel tax, for or against, and the subset of the bond even.
All right. I'm against the fuel tax, primarily because, the majority of our citizens here are on fixed incomes. And when you look at a tax like a fuel tax, we as citizen stakeholders are already paying, the taxes. To increase this fuel tax, we're going to have to pay it in addition to what we're already paying. When the idea may have been, well, we have lots of tourists that come through, we have people who live in the outskirts, of Florence, that use our roads, and the idea is that, they'll start paying for some of that, road maintenance. However, I just don't see that happening. I see people like the tourists who come to town saying, hey, you know what, we're going to fill up at Costco in Eugene. It's much cheaper there. You know, we're already taxing a lot, and I don't like taxation. I don't like the idea of our children who aren't even born yet having to carry this load when they weren't around to make the decision. So I'm against it.
But even though the Register Guard in their op-ed this morning, they demonstrated, which backers have said, that even though many citizens in Florence will actually pay less money because their street maintenance assessment fee on their utility bill will go down.
Right. Well, you know, anytime somebody says we're going to increase your taxes and you're going to pay less, I don't buy it. I'm sorry. What's your solution to street and road maintenance then? Well, first off, I mean, there's a number of things I think the city needs to be doing. You know, if we're paying for incandescent lights all over the place, we could upgrade those. And I know there's an upgrade cost, but the overall expense for LED lighting, for city lights, much cheaper, and they run a lot longer. So I want to look at things creatively. I want to cut cost. You know, we have a $25 million budget for just a little over 8,000 people. You know, it just seems like we need to be able to cut back to sustain. I don't want to make Florence any less of a good place to live, but at the same time, I don't want to overspend.
Shane Burnham, thank you very much. Mildred Rowley, fuel tax, yes, no, gotta go?
Well, I think I'd say no at this time because there's no, what we call a sunset clause. How long is this going to go on? And the same thing with the bond. And if the county is going to raise money through increasing the state fee for registering a vehicle, and it is stated that the county is able to match what the state charges, they do not think they're going to do that. But if they do, say $30, increase our registration fee for cars, $30 being the charge from Lane County, probably 30% of the money raised will go to 20 cities in Lane County divided for the highway. So it's not to say that next year we couldn't say readdress this, but let's see what the county is going to do and how the funding is going to come from the county. At the same time, you know, right, that there is a limit, and we do, I guess it's right there, we know where the money's going, but we definitely do need to address the biggest infrastructure for this city is roads. Sideway maintenance, paths, and of course we get the road, you know, pathway. But it's serving the citizens. And what did I just say? I just read this thing. In fact, it was in the little City Florence newspaper, that the average person pays $450 a year more to maintain their car because of rough roads. So I just think, rather than going this 20-year bond, let's gather a little more information, and it's not to say we won't have a tax, yet not at this voting time.
All right, I'm up against a hard break, so we're going to have to take a break. We come back, we're going to pose the same question of Ron Preisler and Susie Lacer. Headline News is coming up next, and we'll be back with more Our Town gas tax, yes or no, right after this on Coast Radio. It is 4:34. We're at the Florence Event Center. We're a special extended version of Our Town, co-presented by the Florence Area Chamber of Commerce. We heard earlier, before we came on the air, from Brian Castleman, who is the president of the Chamber of Commerce, talking about his desire to bring this to folks. And we have several people in the audience with us, and a lot of people at home listening. By the way, this will be on cable channel 191, and will air several times over the next few weeks. Alan Campbell, Campbell Productions, is filming it, taping it, recording it. Maybe that's the technically correct term, is we're recording it. And the first airing will be tomorrow evening at 7 p.m. on channel 191 if you have a charter. And you can check on that channel for program listings. If you can't catch that at that time, you can check in on 191 and check the schedule, and you can see when it'll come up again. We're continuing the question about the gas tax, yes or no, and if you're opposed, what is your alternative for funding street repairs? And Ron Preisler, it's your turn. Let's talk about that.
Okay, Bob, my feeling on the gas tax is pretty clear. We need it, without any doubt. The fact that it needs to be bonded, we also need that. If we use just the money from the gas tax, we'll be able to fix 2 roads in 2 or 3 years. And we've got 19 to 21 road projects that require work on them in a more immediate time frame than people are recognizing. I look at the bond much as if I was going to buy a house. It would be my mortgage. You pay it off over time. Very few of us have the money to pay for their houses up front. I wish I could do that. I wish I had that kind of money. But I don't, nor does the city have that kind of money. And the cost of asphalt and the cost of labor is going to go up over the next 10 years or 20 years. If you don't start it now, the roads will get into far worse repair in a much shorter time. If I had one change to do in the program, I wish that we could put a sunset clause on it so that the tax would go away when the bond went away. I don't know if we can still do that, but it would be something that I would certainly look into, because I've spoken to a number of people here in Florence, and an awful lot of them have said they don't like the fact that it is going to continue. It should be tied with the bond.
All right, Ron Preisler, he's saying yes on both counts, and so far we're getting mixed reactions. No outright from a couple candidates, yes, but no bonding by a couple candidates, and yes to both there by Ron Preisler. Susie Lacer, you're the final one. Yes or no on the fuel tax, and what about the bond, and what's your solution if there's no fuel tax?
Thank you, Bob. I have the benefit of going last and hearing all of the great ideas from the other candidates, and I am going to follow Ron's lead on this. I am in favor of the gas tax. I think gas taxes are a fair user fee for road users. I like the seasonal adjustment of it. I agree that the bond is required to complete all of the maintenance needed, and roads are one of our primary infrastructures and one of the main responsibilities that the city provides to its residents. And quite frankly, I'm pretty sure that city staff and our city council have put a lot of time and thought and investigation into coming up with this solution, so I trust their guidance.
All right, so there you have it. You spoke the least amount of time of all the rest of them because maybe we've heard all of it. Moving on real quick, the city manager recruitment process is a question I wanted to throw in, and I'm looking for just a quick response, maybe 45 seconds on this. But Susie Lacer, describe what your involvement has been so far in the search for a new city manager. And of course, we know that there's a prime candidate been identified. They're doing a background check, working on contract negotiations, and maybe by the end of this week or Monday, that candidate will be signed up and on board, and we'll know who that person is. But Susie Lacer, real quickly, what has been your involvement in the process? And I guess, have you been satisfied with it so far?
The City Council kindly asked all of the candidates running to be part of a citizen panel in the interview process for all of the 6 finalists, and that was very kind of them, and I appreciated being involved with that. It was very insightful. We had 6 excellent candidates, and I was pleased with the consensus choice that they're currently pursuing. And I think the process has been very equitable, and I hope will result in a great new manager for us.
All right. Ron Preisler, give me real quick, what's your involvement been in the process, and have you been satisfied with your involvement and the process itself?
I was invited to be a part of it. Unfortunately, or fortunately, my wife and I were in Scandinavia for 2 weeks, so we missed the process. But from my understanding, I believe there were 5 or 6 candidates that were brought to town with their families to show them around. They were interviewed by a number of people on the council and potential candidates. I think the process itself was run very well. It was run more open than previous processes have been.
All right. Thank you. Clarence Lysdale, same question.
Well, I was one of the candidates involved in the candidate interviews along with Susie and George, and again, they were good candidates. I think that the process was transparent and was really quite consistent. I think we all would agree. So let's just hope that we get have a successful we're able to hire this guy successfully.
And it may be a woman. There are 6 finalists, 1 woman, 5 men. Yeah.
Hire this person.
Yeah. That's what I used guy in a non-gender specific sense.
A good process as far as I'm concerned.
All right. Mildred Rowley, the city manager replacement process. Involved and your feelings on it?
I thought it was wonderful to get the invitation. We had a family commitment that had been scheduled far before the date. And from reading the background of the candidates, it seems like we have some really good candidates. And I trust the process, like Susie was saying, that we will get a good city manager. And I have really appreciated the interim city manager.
All right, Shane, thank you, Mildred Rowley. Shane Burnham, how about it?
Right, I too was invited to participate. Unfortunately, I had a prior commitment for a work project. However, I did make it to the meet and greet session that was held here, and I got to meet all of the candidates. I'm confident, like these guys said, in the process. I felt like it was a transparent process. There was a lot of effort put into it, and I trust the outcome.
All right, and wrapping things up, George Liddon, city manager process. What's your involvement been, and have you been satisfied with that?
Very much so. The city and the city staff really bent over backwards to accommodate our presence. It was a lengthy process from 8:30 in the morning till about 7 at night when we all gathered in chambers, selected gentlemen in question. In summation, the candidate that we picked, and it was unanimous, if we put all the candidates in a bag, shook them up, and took all the best qualities of each candidate, I think that's what we got in this package. So I hope that he finishes out ahead, and I'm sure he will. We're going to have a good city manager.
All right, thank you, George Liddon. This is Our Town. I'm Bob Sneddon, visiting with 6 candidates for Florence City Council, and let's just jump right straight into, well, we're going to open up the meat grinder, rhododendron multi-use path. I think we all know where we are at this point. We all may have different opinions of how we got where we are, or maybe even exactly where we are, but the point is, it has become quite a point of contention in many parts of the community, and I'm going to just start right with Mildred Rowley. How do we get out of this? What's your view on the multi-use path, and how do we get out of this?
I think the multi-use path is needed. I mean, it's been discussed from, I look at old newspapers from 2004. It's not a new issue. I think somehow, I think the council has made an effort to communicate. It has been the ears and the voice for the community, but somehow it's been a startle for part of the community. I think we need that path. Now, it's federally funded. Can it be modified by the state, DOT? But we need safety, we need the path, we need it for the residents. Residents that walk and bike, and yes, the tourists can take advantage of it. But we do need some change on that highway besides the highway being paved.
So the plan, the last incarnation of the plan from a few months ago, where it was the very broad iteration of it, is that fine, too much, or does it need to be scaled back a little bit?
Well, if it can be scaled back, depending what DOT and how flexible they will be. I think if they will not be flexible, then future grant writing has to be curtailed, because we do want to extend that path.
All right.
We don't want to stop there. So hopefully there can be some modification, but the council has really put a lot of energy and thought into this, as has the city planning themselves. So I would hate to see us turn down the grant.
All right. Clarence Lysdale. Doesn't matter where we are, how do we move on from here? What sort of shape should that path ultimately take, if it takes shape at all?
Well, I think the city staff is working really hard with the state, trying to get into a configuration that we can all be satisfied with, including the section on green trees, which is the biggest concern. As far as I'm concerned, safety of biking and pedestrians on Rhodey Drive is a real issue at this point. I think that we need to handle the green tree situation in a way that reasonably satisfactory for them as well as for the requirements of the path. I think we need to have some sort of a plan for completing at least a segment of it to get up to 35th Street, even if that has to be a very narrow path done by our own standards. We need to get tied into something. We can't end up at Wildlands and let it go there. And I think that's possible also. So basically, let's do the path. We've already committed the money that goes with the city match. Let's try to make it something we can all be proud of.
All right, George Litton, let's hear your viewpoint on this.
No one is against a path. We do need a nice path in which to walk and perhaps ride a bicycle, but not at the detriment and expense of residents of the city. Green Trees happens to be in the forefront of this because they're going to lose all that vegetation under the proposed existing plan. That goes against the ordinance of the city to maintain greenery and vegetation. The big problem that hasn't really been discussed very much is the fact that Rhododendron Drive is an arterial road, and as such, it has a higher speed limit. If that road could be redesignated, speed reduced to 25 miles an hour, it would be safer. If we could develop a back road into the transfer station to where those big trucks coming down the road, that would make it safer. The path of some sort is needed under the current situation because at least the ground on the side of the road would be level, but not under the current plan. Because it is a federal grant, it is taxpayer money coming back to the people. The problem with that is the strings attached dictate how it will be used. That I have a problem with. The path, I don't.
All right, George Litton, you realize you just got everybody that lives in Saysa Village and along 35th Street just all paying attention to the radios. Ron Preisler, and I'll explain that in a minute. Ron Preisler, your thoughts on this?
My thoughts on the path are that, as first proposed, when it was going to be 13 or 15 feet wide, infringing upon Green Trees was not acceptable. The community came together and told the government that it was not acceptable. And I think pretty much the council and the mayor agreed with that. Since that time, I know there has been, although I'm not sure on the specifics, there are 2 plans that were put forward to ODOT that had possibilities to continue the bike path and to widen the road. The safety issue, which has been mentioned, is critical. And my wife walks on that road. I don't want her hit by a truck or by a car. There is nowhere literally to walk or bike as it is configured now. It needs to be changed. And we also could take advantage of the fact that if we can work with the state and federal government on that grant, it's to our advantage. That is a lot of money to leave on the table. I would rather they pay $1 million than the city of Florence, because down the road, we are going to have to widen that street. We are going to have to repave it. The fact that we're going to put the power lights underground is a tremendous help to the area. I think there are way more pluses than negatives, but we need to be very careful about how much we intrude upon the privacy of those people who live on both sides of that road.
All right, Ron Preisler, let's go on, because I'm looking at the clock and I need to move quickly. Susie Lacer, how do we move on from where we're at with a multi-use path on Rhododendron Drive?
I think we're on the right track moving forward. The city, as I understand it, is currently reviewing the plan and taking into consideration all of the concerns that have been raised through the public input process. So I think we're on the right track for moving forward, and I trust that we will come up with a plan that's agreeable to everyone.
But I think I'm going to just pose a follow-up, because you took a very brief answer, but it seemed that when city staff rolled this forward, they felt the same way, that they had been responsive to many people in the community. But when it became public, it became very apparent very quickly that no, it didn't. So
I think the city staff felt they had been responsive to the public input they had received, because the requirements of this grant required massive public comment periods, public solicitation, very active process.
do you think the fact that it was spread out over such a long time may have worked against the public input in this case?
I think that's probably part of it, and people often don't pay attention to, even though the city makes the best efforts, they're required to, and they go above and beyond.
Yeah.
People don't pay attention to everything until it's right in their backyard.
All right, Shane Burnham, let's finish up with you on this topic. Multi-use path, how do we move on, or what do we do to move on from this?
Well, I agree with everything that's been said here. It's kind of crazy. We've summarized a 10-year conversation in about 10 minutes.
All right, so vote for all 6 and we'll have co-counsel.
I'm a biker. I use our trails. I walk, and I even work along the side of that road in some areas. And truthfully, when I'm driving that road and I'm passing somebody, it's a safety issue. It's scary to be driving, and it's even scarier to be the one being passed. So something does have to be done. I do think the city's on the right track. I do think they've made a valiant effort, but I know that, in this discussion with the public, like was said, I think people really they're not aware till it's in their backyard. And I think that's been part of the issue. I do think there's a little bit more work that could be done now that we're at this stage, and I would like to see, I know it's not going to be a unanimous decision by the public, how we go forward, but I would like to see more, of our Florentians participate.
All right. You're listening to Our Town. I'm Bob Sneddon. We have 6 candidates on stage: Susie Lacer, Shane Burnham, George Liddon, Mildred Rowley, Ron Preisler, and Clarence Lysdale. They are all seeking one of 3 open positions on the Florence City Council. You realize that you will be in the majority. 3 of you will be 75% of the Florence City Council come the 1st of January. Real quick, give me just a very quick response, because I only have about 5 minutes to get 6 of you to answer. But we'll start on the far end with Susie, and we're just going to go right down the way here. Susie, handling the transition, do you anticipate any changes in operations of city policy going forward with such a massive changeover?
Not right away. We're going to be having a brand new city manager in addition to 60 to 80% new councilors, so no sudden changes in my view.
Clarence Lysdale?
No, I don't see any real problem with the transition. It happens in city government, and we're part of it.
Shane has his own microphone, so. Shane Burnham.
Same answer. I don't see any problems with the transition, but I think if there were any sudden changes, it would be a mistake on our part to allow it to happen.
All right. George Liddon?
I concur with no change. Should be an easy transition.
All right. Ron Preisler?
It goes further than that. There'll be 3 new councilors, there'll be a new city manager, and we don't know what's going to happen in the mayor's race.
Right, could it be a new mayor as well?
Could be a new mayor as well. I think we're going to all have to learn to listen to each other and work together and accomplish things as a group. I don't see any other way forward than working together collegially.
I think, didn't we learn that in kindergarten? Ron Preisler, Mildred Rowley.
I'm Mildred Rowley. They didn't have kindergarten in Vermont, so I probably learned it in 1st grade. I just think we'll just, like the interim city planner said, the most important thing is for the council to work together. And I think we will work together, whoever is elected and whoever the mayor is, because that's our duty to the citizens. That's the best thing we can do for the citizens of Florence is work together for the people.
All right, Mildred Rowley, thank you very much. I'm Bob Sneddon. This is Our Town. For listeners on the radio, we're going to be taking a break in just a couple of minutes. And after that break, we'll come back. We'll be talking with the mayor candidates. But folks here, we're going to keep the questions going. I have another question for you folks, and it has to do with economic development. So here's for our listener. If you want to hear the answer to this question about economic development and job creation from the Florence City Council candidates, you're going to have to tune in to channel 191 tomorrow night at 7 o'clock and watch for that, because Alan's going to keep filming here for a couple minutes while we do that. We have coming up at the top of the hour local news, national news, little Charles Osgood, and we're going to take care of some business. We will be back on the air at about 15 or 16 minutes after. When we do, we will have Alan Burns, Nola Xavier, Joe Henry. We will talk to them. In the third hour of the program, from 6 to 7, we will have all 9 candidates on stage, and folks in the audience will have a chance to ask them questions. ABC News is coming up next, and we're going to listen to one of my guys here to get us there to the top of the hour. Don't go away if you're listening on the radio. Keep listening after the news. Come back to us, or come down and join us at the Florence Event Center. This is our town. All right, I'm out. So, here comes the bonus question. Economic and job development. How involved should city government be in economic development and job creation? Ron Preisler, why don't you give me a minute or so on that?
I think the city council needs to support small businesses and the effort to bring new businesses into the city. It also, in my view, it also needs to support one of the problem areas that we have when companies want to move, or people come here to Florence, professionals, our school systems. People come here, they come here for 2 or 3 years, and then they leave. What is the reason they leave? It's certainly not the natural beauty around us or the lack of housing. Generally what people tell you is that there's no place for their kids' schooling to continue. We need to make an effort as a community, as a city, as a government to improve our education process so that we can retain people to the city.
All right. Susie Lacer, same question.
I think we all agree economic development is desperately needed in our town. The city is limited in what active steps we can actually do, but I think the city should do everything they can. Those steps can include making sure we maintain and improve our infrastructure, specifically business-related, fiber optics, expanding that network within town, having business-friendly codes and zoning, which we are working very hard on, improving livability to make our community attractive to business and entrepreneurs and attractive for expanding businesses, and continuing our use of enterprise zones to make it attractive, again, for businesses to move and relocate here.
All right. Clarence Lonsdale, economic development, job creation.
Well, that's a tough nut in a small town on the coast. I think that the city has a role to play, certainly promoting the business park, which we've been attempting to do for some time. The only thought that I have would be that we have a lot of experienced talent, retired or semi-retired in the city, perhaps arranging some sort of volunteer kind of activity that would capitalize on their experience in terms of what does it take to attract businesses and what kind of businesses fit here might be a possible additional approach that the city could consider.
All right. George Liddon.
We have, as was just mentioned, the fiber optic cable, elastic cable in town, which Shane is well versed with. There's a tremendous opportunity that's just sitting there begging to be used. There's some property up there adjacent to that that is just begging to be sold. We can put that together, I say we, the city, the council, and the property owners. And with the new city manager and his expertise in marketing Florence as a opportunity for a tech firm, either a call center or light manufacturing tech, something of that nature, it would be perfect. We could become a small tech center because we have the land to do it and we have the current infrastructure to support a small one. With that tax base, we can increase the revenue and increase the infrastructure to accommodate growth.
All right. Mildred Rowley.
I would say that Florence has its natural beauty, and yes, we can polish Florence. I don't think it's ragged and tagged. I do think that the city has the opportunity and has the model from Ashland to be involved in bringing, as we call, small businesses and even having incubators, because the city does own property that is not being used. And also, as we say, as we were saying, the infrastructure is there, the cable is there, and you have so many mentors that are not, that mentorship that's so available, and people a little isolated sometimes with all this intelligence, that we can really network and help people feel even not so much in a gated community, but in the community of Florence, and draw on that talent and reach out. And we already are depending so much on volunteers in the city because they love the city. So I don't think there's a whole lot of things that need to be turned over. I think researched and polished, and so many grants. Like right now, the city's offering that free compost. It was costing them $80,000 a year or more to truck things to the landfill, being compost and brush. And now they're calling citizens, come get your free compost.
But how does that help job creation?
Well, job creation in the sense the city has the availability, has the cable, has the buildings, and has the intelligence in this community. So we just need to coordinate and get that together, and there are grants available, as people have talked about.
All right, Shane Burnham.
I believe the city has a direct responsibility towards this. We do have assets here, that we can access. I think the fact that there's a lot of small business experience sitting on the stage right now will help towards that, because it seems like nobody's looking at those assets. They're not looking at them in a way that they can put something together. I think that's one of the links that's been missing. So relaxing, the legislation to make it easier for small businesses, or to market Florence better than we have before. My company's been in town for 6 years, and not one city councilor has been out there. Nobody has come and knocked on the door and said, hey, what can you offer to this town? What can this business do for us? You're a local asset in our business park, and nobody's done that. So I think there's a big gap there when it comes to marketing what we have. We can put in a call center. We can have 120 family wage jobs. We can offer tax breaks and incentives to attract businesses. There's a number of things that can be done that aren't being done, and I want to see them done.
I want to ask you specifically about ACS, since you brought that up. I remember when you came to town, and I mean you, ACS. I don't know if you were in the vanguard of that or not personally, but that was one of the things that was discussed and talked about, was the fact that there would eventually be access to that for businesses possibly in Florence. It might take a little technological leap, but I mean, would that be simple or complex? And when I say simple, I mean inexpensive, or complex versus expensive.
Well, it depends how much legislation we got to cut through, right?
Okay.
But the idea is that Alaska Communication Systems has a building here with add-drop capability at this time. If somebody were to come to us and say, hey, we want to tie in, it can be done very quickly.
Okay.
That's what they do. And
So
they're prepared to do that and make
it would
happen.
maybe just take the infrastructure between wherever in town and your building, but that would be much easier than getting the connection somewhere else in Portland.
Right, but to tie into our infrastructure is approximately 500 yards.
Yeah.
We're on Kingwood, we're in a box there. We could tie into Oregon Fast pretty quickly. We could tie into the BPA route. There's a number of things.
Okay. Shane Burnham, thank you very much. And one last question for each of you, and this is just a real quick one so we can all get to know you. Would you each just give me like a real quick encapsulation of where you grew up and why you're not there anymore? And Shane, let's start with you.
I spent my childhood in Alaska, spent 30 years up there. The reason I'm not there anymore is because my back's tired of shoveling, and the cold weather just got hard.
Okay. Mildred Rowley, you came from Vermont, I think I heard that.
Yeah, Vermont and New York State. I'm no longer a Vermont refugee. I love Oregon. Before New York State, I was a Vermont refugee. So in '96, we got tired of the winters in New York State, and we went to New Mexico. And we spent 16 years on the desert where I had my own practice, business, and medical practice. And we just got tired of the brown. And we did not want to go back to the winters, and we love it here. So I'm no longer a refugee. I'm an Oregonian.
And why don't you just hand that to Ron Preisler, because he's going to tell us where he grew up and why he's not there any longer.
I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, moved out to Long Island, kept moving out on the island until we fell off, and we fell off in California. We did that because there were work opportunities in California at that time. My business had gone south in one of the recessions, and we needed to start our lives over again. So we moved to California. Well, after 29 years in California, we had had enough of the sunshine and the smog and the traffic and everywhere you turned people. So we started looking for another place to live. It just so happens that our oldest daughter and our grandkids live in Portland, so Oregon seemed to be a natural place for us to go.
All right, thank you, Ron. Susie Lacer, same question.
I am one of the rarities around here, a native Oregonian. I grew up in the Lebanon area in the valley. I lived in Astoria for 12 years and developed a lifelong affection for the Oregon coast at that point. Bounced around Oregon and Washington a bit following jobs, and always knew I wanted to end up back on the Oregon coast, so here I am, happily.
All right, George Liddon.
20 years ago, in my opening, my wife and I took a trip. We came out to Oregon. We went up and down the coast of Washington, spent about 2 weeks out here. On the way home, when your wife cries because you're leaving Oregon, you know you're coming back. 20 years later, we came back. This is where we had planned to retire, and so we made our goals and managed to retire early and show up here. Been in Florence for just under 3 years.
So where'd you grow up?
Kansas City, Missouri.
Oh, okay.
Where the summertime temperature is 100 degrees and the humidity is the same.
Mm-hmm. All right, so were you watching the baseball game last night?
Did I what?
Well, no, never mind. That wasn't the Royals, it was somebody else. Clarence Lysdale, were you watching baseball last night?
No, I didn't watch baseball either. I grew up in Minnesota, went to the University of Minnesota, graduated as an engineer in that time frame. The glory was in rocketry and spacecraft, and I worked in that in Southern California for a while. Morphed into the marine field, which I spoke about. I retired from that. Worked here actually out of Florence for a while in that arena, and love Oregon.
All right. And I just realized my faux pas. Teresa, I apologize. Do you have questions for these folks?
I do.
Yeah. But why don't you ask one real quick, and then I'll give you a chance to hit them again in the last hour or two, since I missed you.
Okay, thanks. Good evening, everyone. Aside from the specific issues that you've all addressed tonight, I just had a general question. When somebody is running for office, what do you do to prepare for the campaign? And what are you doing now, should you win the election, to prepare yourself to serve as a city councilor? Specifically, have you become involved in the city, including the city budget, the city charter? Well, getting familiar with the budget which is the most important thing to me. Rules of order for running council meetings. I always see when new councilors come in, that gets a little crazy. And finally, how the city has set up goals over the last many years. The council gets together and sets up goals every year. Are you aware of what those goals are, and do you plan to continue to support them? So that's a very broad question, but what I'm coming down to is how are you preparing for this campaign, and what makes you prepared to serve on city government?
All right. George Liddon, why don't you answer that?
Thinking about running for city council was a big decision, and I decided to do that based on information the city had provided and with several meetings with the city regarding the multi-use path. Preparing for the campaign itself, it's been a word of mouth, myself talking to people. I've met with a few business owners out and about. I've taken the signs out and asked permission of business owners to put it in their property. As far as the administration and council, I am familiar with Robert's rules. I am a current president of an HOA, and so we have similar rules and operations. And as far as the inside knowledge of the current budget, other than what they print for public digest, that is all the information I have from the city at this time. But I feel I'm prepared to work with the council and the next mayor and bring my talent to the citizens of Florence.
All right, let's pose that question next to Shane Burnham. And if I could ask you guys to be pretty quick and concise on this, because we're bumping up against time when we have to bring the mayor candidates in.
In preparation for this candidacy, you know, I did review the city budget. I am familiar with Robert's Rules of Orders, and I serve on the board currently, so you know, I have an understanding how boards work, courtesies, how they're supposed to function, how they're supposed to be conducted. And as far as campaigning, I've talked with people. I have a Facebook page up. I have signs that are going out actively campaigning.
Okay. Susie Lacer.
I currently serve on the Library District Board, so I'm familiar with local government boards and their operation. I also worked for 6+ years with Port of Sayusla, again administering for that elected board, so I have a good background in both Oregon public meeting law and Oregon budget law. Since deciding to run for this position, I have met with our interim city manager a few times, and he has been incredibly valuable. I've also met with several of our city department heads to get their take on where the city is, where we're going, and I'm about halfway through meeting with them and have appointments with the remainder of them over this week and next week.
All right, Mildred Rowley.
I have been doing quite a bit of reading, and at the same time talking to people, and including the interim city manager, which, as he said, was very helpful. And I guess I'm just calling on my background to share with people and listen to their stories and to find out what their needs are. So I've just been talking to a lot of people, and with my patients, I don't bring it up. I just listen to their needs in the community. So I do, of course, know Robert's Rules of Order, having been in enough medical meetings and being a plebe in the process. So I just think I'm bringing my willingness to learn, to listen, and as I think the interim city manager said, it's the job of a councilwoman or man to be the eyes and the ears of the community and look after the interests of the community, and as he stated, the most important thing is to work together. So I've just been showing up when I'm not seeing patients. Thank you.
Ron Chrysler, what are you doing to prepare and make the transition?
Funny you should ask. I've reviewed the goals of the city, which is pretty extensive. The comprehensive plan. I've been calling citizens in the communities for the last week or 10 days. I try to do an hour of phone calling a day. Some of you probably have heard me already. To tell you what I can bring to the table, but also to listen to what your needs are. I too have been and visited with the acting city manager, Mr. Patterson, who was very helpful as well. And he had given me some, I guess it was directions from previous councils, what their roles were. And I found them very helpful and also a very good learning tool. So whenever I have the chance, I go back and I read what previous city council meetings have brought up, and I've been attending city council meetings when I've been available.
All right, Ron Chrysler, thank you very much. Mildred Rowley, Ron Preisler, George Liddon, Shane Burnham, Clarence Lysdale, Susie Lacer. You will be choosing 3 of these to carry on and move on to City Council on November 5th. Thank you very much for coming, and we'll be bringing the mayor candidates out. It's going to be a very quick transition, so thank you all for coming. Stick around because we'll be back up at 6 o'clock. Welcome back to Our Town, Bob Sneddon, hanging out at the Florence Event Center where we are talking politics. It's the silly season. It's the election time of year. Ballots will be mailed on October 15th, I believe it is, from Lane County, and then voters will have just over 2 weeks to, actually about 3 weeks to return their ballots by November 4th. And in Florence, we have something that we have not had for quite some time, and that is contested races across the board. We've had contested races for mayor and single candidates for council in the past few years, once or twice, or we've had a contested council race, but a single candidate for mayor. This year, all 4 positions on the ballot have drawn at least 2 candidates, and of course for the mayor, there are 3 candidates. All 3 of them are here with us this afternoon. Nola Xavier is the incumbent mayor. Prior to being elected mayor 2 years ago, she served on the city council for 8 years. Sitting to her right is Alan Burns, and he served a combined 12 years on the Florence City Council as a councilor and as a mayor, 2 terms as mayor, 3 terms as mayor. 16 years total. How did you do? Oh, you took a break. City charter has 12-year term limit consecutive, but you can take 2 years off and come back. And Alan did that. He also currently serves on the Florence Planning Commission. To Alan's right is Joe Henry, and Joe was elected to Florence City Council 2 years ago, and of course had to resign that position in order to run for mayor. And we're just going to jump right into it and give each one of you a couple minutes. And Nola Xavier, since you're the incumbent, we're going to give you, would you just give us a couple minutes? Tell us about yourself, and if you pick up the microphone there on the stand next to you, tell us about yourself and why should Florence voters re-elect you?
Thank you. Let me first apologize for the fact that I woke up with a miserable cold this morning, so I hope you can hear me. But I've lived in Florence for almost 18 years, and it was one of the best decisions that my husband and I ever made was to move here. The first time that we ever had the choice of moving by not following a job, but going where our hearts took us, and that was to Florence. And I have, as Bob said, been serving the city for the last 10 years. And in that time, I have been involved with a number of issues that I think are really important and have been very helpful to our city. I serve as the chairman for the Urban Renewal Agency and have almost from its beginning. And we have done some great things in this city. When the topic of economic development comes up, I'll expand on that a little bit. I'm very proud to have been part of the city's developing the long-range financial plan that we now follow, which has put us in a very stable financial position and allows us to be able to make our budget decisions based on not only what we look at today, but what the effects of that will be in 2, 3, 5 years down the road. We've cleaned up the city codes and zoning, and we've made the city more business-friendly. We recently worked on the parking issue in Old Town to try and make it easier for business to expand down there, current businesses. Because one of the things that we have heard over and over again is the best way for Florence to grow is what's called economic gardening, which is to help those businesses that you already have to be more successful. And we are trying to do that. I serve on several commissions, that serve countywide. I'm on the executive board of the Lane Council of Governments and serve on their audit committee. And I think it's important that we develop those kinds of relationships so that we can work cooperatively together. I serve as the chairman of what's called the Rural Housing Rehab Program, which has been a grant-funded program that Florence invested in about $400,000 in a number of years ago, along with several other cities in Lane County, to help people who are in low economic status but own homes to do needed repairs so that they could stay in those homes. And we have been very successful. We did 35 projects in Florence. So my time's up. Pass it.
All right, Nola, Xavier, you could hang on to that one. Alan Burns, introduce yourself if you would, and tell us why folks should elect you once again to the position that you held before.
My name.
Yeah, it should be on, so you guys shouldn't have to do it.
My name's Alan Burns. I've been here in Florence for just under 30 years. My wife, Karen, and I have a business in Florence.
I'm going to interject. Nola took 3 minutes, so you're welcome to 3 minutes. All right.
As mentioned, I've served on the city council for a total of 16 years. 12 hit term limits, and then I got off for 2 years. And Mayor Brubaker, Phil, got me on a bet, so I ran again for city council position for 4 years. Got off there 2 years ago, and asking people to elect me to mayor this year. I have a couple of things that I see. Mayor Xavier made reference as far as Florence being a little bit more business friendly. I've got a little issues sometimes with that, Mayor. I am one of the few people who've actually developed out in the business park. My wife and I, our business, and I've had some hiccups with the city of Florence, and I think some changes can happen. I am a little scared in Florence. People have talked about economic development. That is very, very important, very high in my charts, but there's an element of Florence that I'm a little concerned about, that I don't want to lose the small town feeling that a lot of us have moved here to Florence that we like for the benefit of large economic development. So I think it could be massaged, and I think you can have the best of both worlds, but I am a little concerned about it. So that's why I'm asking voters to elect me mayor.
All right, Alan Burns, thank you very much. Joe Henry, he only used 2 of his 3 minutes, but you don't get his extra minutes. So give us 3 minutes. You give us 3 minutes, introduce yourself.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Joe Henry, and as you know, I'm going to be on the ballot for mayor come November. My wife Pam and I retired here in 1999 after I spent 38 years in the consumer finance mortgage business. I had attained the level of Senior Vice President of Operations, had profit and loss responsibility for approximately 350 branch offices and banks throughout the country, and just thought it was time to go. I have a solid background in finance and accounting, budgeting, personnel and salary administration. When we moved here, Pam and I actually started 2 businesses. I started a mortgage brokerage operation, which was very successful until the downturn in 2007. I'm still active in originating loans through a large brokerage. And we also became partners in the local dive surf kayak shop here in town, which might sound kind of strange, but I was a dive instructor in my spare time, so that just seemed like a natural thing to do. But it ended up we were working 7 days a week and thought we were retired. So we got out of that a few years ago. We've become very involved in a number of community activities. I am the president and treasurer of my church, of course a member of the Florence City Council. I'm on the board of directors for the Oregon Coast Military Museum. I'm the business manager and have been on the board of my homeowners association. Been a longtime member of the Elks Club, and I have been involved with the Florence Ambassadors. 2 years ago, there was one name on the ballot for 2 open city council positions, which piqued my interest. I thought, why in a city like Florence was there only one person willing to step forward and serve? So I did a write-in campaign and was elected to the city council. Since that time, I've served on the council and have seen some issues, some of them not so positive, and a number of opportunities that I would like to see happen for Florence. I'm sure we'll get into a number of those issues later in the conversation, but I would just, at this point, I'd like again to thank KCST and the Chamber for putting on this event and let us share our views. So thank you.
All right, thank you, Joe Henry. Joe Henry, Alan Burns, Nola Xavier, 3 candidates for mayor in Florence. And Joe, I'd forgotten that the write-in campaign from 2 years ago, so I'm glad you brought that up. That was one thing I didn't mention leading up to this. I have to take a real quick break, 2 minutes. When I come back, Teresa Bear will step up and ask our 3 mayoral candidates a question. Be back with our town candidates for Florence mayor in 2 minutes right after this. You're listening to Coast Radio. Nola Xavier, Joe Henry, and Alan Burns are up with us right now. And Teresa Bear is the editor of Sunnyside News, and she has a question to pose for these 3 candidates.
Thank you, Bob. I'm very pleased to hear that economic development is being at the top of the list of important topics this evening. But I've never been clear on what the city government's role is in promoting economic development. So I'd like to hear a few words about that. But I'd also like to hear that I've only been in this town for 10 years. And from my personal experience, what I find are a huge low to middle income class that's suffering under poor wages, and housing. And housing is a terrible issue for people who are trying to raise a family or live in anything larger than a 1-bedroom apartment. I don't even know if there's any apartments left in Florence. So how do you feel that by increasing employment opportunities and bringing larger companies here, how are you going to accommodate the families who are going to be working for probably fair to middle income wages but need housing?
All right, let's start with Joe Henry, and kind of a 2-part question. What's government's role in economic development? That was the first part of the question. And then how do you accommodate, especially if you're bringing plenty of people from outside the community, how are you going to accommodate that in the housing? Joe Henry, can you give me a couple minutes on that?
Okay, starting with the first part. We just returned from a League of Oregon Cities convention where the buzzword was economic development. That seems to be on everybody's mind these days, and everybody's competing for that. To tell you what the government's role is, I have to tell you what we're doing about it as we speak, and it's basically very little. It's not on the council's goals, nor has it been for the last 2 years. There's no money in the budget for it. There's no personnel dedicated toward that effort. And if we want to make economic development work, we have to have some professionals dedicated to it. I believe we have to have an economic board that works in concert with the Chamber of Commerce, who, by the way, has done a great job of driving tourism. I have to applaud them. I didn't think it was going to work quite as well as it did. But if you don't think that we got a lot of tourists, you go down and sit at the light at 9th Street and you feel like you're back in California. So the Chamber's done an excellent job, but tourism and economic development are not the same things. Tourism drives activity, brings a lot of people here, and it creates a lot of service jobs, but those jobs are not something that you can sustain a family. I felt bad for Shane that when his kids graduated from high school and they had to leave the area to get a job where they could raise a family. That's true pretty much across the board. We all know many, many people who have kids that have to move away. So economic development, we're going to have to dedicate some resources to it, both financially and personnel-wise. In concert with the Chamber, we're going to have to form partnerships with other taxing authorities, such as the port. We need to improve our relationship with the port. LCC, Dune City. There's many, many things that we could do together. The big thing that I took away from this LOC conference were the success stories out there, like in Springfield, Eugene, Hillsboro, Oregon has an Intel plant there that we're talking billions of dollars worth of revenue or income to that economy.
Joe, I'm going to ask you to just kind of summarize.
Okay. I just think we have to dedicate some resources to it. I'd rather dedicate the resources to that than some of the things that we're dedicating our resources to at this point.
All right, Joe Henry, his views on that. And you know what, let's take the government role question first, and then come back and we'll take the how do you accommodate if you're successful. So, Nola Xavier, what's government's role in economic development? Oh, I need you to use the microphone.
I guess I could best explain that by describing some of the things that we actually have done to help with economic development. One is that we obtained a grant from the League of, from the LCOG, the Lane Council of Governments, and have fiber into town, so that a business that depends on the internet or high-speed connections has a backbone that would allow them to operate here. We expanded our enterprise zones when they were renewed the last time. And by doing that, if building or business gets developed in those enterprise zones, they have tax incentives to help them. The Urban Renewal Agency put over $2 million into Old Town for water, sewer, stormwater, and that new road, so that a developer wouldn't have to do that should they want to come and develop that property across the street from the event center or on the old ball field. We are trying to prepare the ground for the businesses that might be interested. We affiliate with Business Oregon and try to use their resources to look at recruitment. We don't have one individual who is dedicated to economic development, but we do have one individual who is part-time, our economic development director, and she works with the Lane County economic development person so that any opportunities that look like they could fit in Florence, we're advised of them so that we can contact them, so that we can try to encourage them to at least look at us. We have some challenges because we don't have good infrastructure in terms of being able to move product. We don't see that as being one of the ways that we will attract business because our rubber on the road connections are not good. But in other areas, we do have opportunities, and we are trying to make it as economically possible for business to relocate as they can.
All right, Nola Xavier, thank you very much. Alan Burns. What's government's role in economic development?
Well, Teresa, your question, what the government has done or what government can do. In year 2000, 1999 to 2001, City Council put together an economic development committee of about 25 people made up of the school district, Lane Community College, the port, the financial institutions here, the realty market, and the hospital, and others that were volunteers or people with experience in the community. From that year program came out what we're looking for, and also on that committee was people from the state. From that, Business Park expanded in 2004, about 6 lots were sold, and 2 of them were to brand new businesses in town. The other 3 came about and more people were hired. During that time, if you remember, several businesses were thinking about relocating to Florence. It was myself, with approval of the council and the city manager, we went to a couple of those businesses that were talking about leaving out of the county, one, the Forest Service. They were leaving Mapleton, they put in a small office on 101, and they were talking about going into Walport. City council at that point talked about giving some incentives in the business park for that business if they would stay in Lane County, because at that point there was probably about 15 families that they were going to have to commute, leave, and we tried to keep that community idea of the Forest Service in the city of Florence. Unfortunately, they went to Walport, and I know why, and I understand the reason. But we did our best, and the city of Florence is going to have to do some win-win situations for business coming. Out of those 6 lots, 2 new businesses came to town, and other businesses have relocated into the business park and expanded their employees to much more. That's what we're going to have to do. And I'd like to see, and I don't know why the business plan that those 25 people in the state put together is not being used, but it's there, and it's been talked.
All right, Alan Burns. A quick follow-up question to that. I want all 3 of you, if you would, just give me a quick response. When people talk about economic development, and I first ran for city council in 1988, and Joe, I can assure you, this very same buzzwords were going around League of Oregon cities and local circles. This conversation we're having right here could have taken place in 1988. But what I want to know is, when we talk about economic development, why does the topic of bringing businesses in from out of town and relocating become the #1 topic? Shouldn't you be talking about local businesses instead? And it is, Alan, you respond to that one first.
Yeah, I mean...
Microphone, please.
Sorry. Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest, it was discussed in that committee, in that document I was telling you about, as much as it is important to see if businesses could relocate from outside the area, it's even more important to get established businesses in the city to maybe move.
And let me clarify that. How do you do that?
What?
How do you do that? And not necessarily move, but grow, add a few employees. How does government do that? How does the city do that?
For my wife and I'll use that as an example.
Perfect.
We were outgrowing Old Town. Mm-hmm. We just needed more room. There was no parking. We just needed the new facility. And we went to the city of Florence. Things were fine. It was after when I got out as mayor, so there was no backroom stuff. But we agreed on a price for the lot. We built. We hired more people, and several other businesses across the street. The original lot across the street where Dr. Holmes is was actually owned by Integrity Plumbing. They were going to build new facilities and so on. I think it's a partnership between the city and the chamber. The idea is very important to see if businesses, there's a lot of businesses I can think of in Old Town or 101 that really could probably better serve in the business park.
All right, Joe Henry, if you would respond to that too. Why not talk to small businesses about increasing job opportunities, incremental growth, and what can the city do to help that?
Well, Bob, I think part of the problem is a very high percentage of our businesses in town are service-type jobs that basically provide low to mid-level incomes at best. With the amount of, right now, I mean, I don't know how much more tourism we can generate. We have the capacity for, our hotels are full, which obviously is great for our transient room tax. But how many more jobs, I'll ask you, how many more jobs can they generate in the service industry? We have very few businesses in town. Yes, I agree, we should devote resources toward helping the businesses in town that can generate sustainable family level jobs. We should certainly encourage them, but our community actually hasn't grown much in the last 10 or 12 years. In fact, our revenue in the city is down in the last 10 years substantially.
And the population is less now than it was in the 2000 census.
Part of the problem is getting back to Shane and his example, the people that graduate from school here don't stay. They have to move away to get a job. If we had jobs available where they could buy a home and raise a family, they would stay, stabilize our population. We need to look outside, though, to bring in companies that can provide those jobs. And to do that, you need some professional help. We can do all that we want ourselves, but if we're going to actually make this work. We have to get somebody that's had success at doing it. You can talk about it all day long, but you need to have done it. And it's like hiring our new city manager. We're bringing in somebody that has a lot of years of experience and track record to help us set the city back on the right path. So it's the same way with economic development. And I've got 38 years in business, so that doesn't make me an economic development expert. We need some professional help.
All right. Nola Xavier, same question, the follow-up to that, and that is, what about small businesses, the businesses that aren't existing? What can government do to help them?
That's when I use the term economic gardening. That's exactly what I was referring to, is that the fact that these businesses are here, they're dedicated to Florence, and they provide the backbone that we have. I think that we need to do everything that we can to encourage that growth, because these are people that we already know and we're already working with. And I think that one of the big things that we've done is trying to make sure that the attitude when business people come in to City Hall and ask that they have an idea or they have a plan or they want to have some help, that the first thing that they hear is, what can we do to help you? We have tried to instill that kind of an attitude in everybody in City Hall, so that when they come in, we don't say, oh, the zoning's wrong, or the plans don't allow it. It's, what can we do to help you? And that whatever that is, talk to us, let us know. But I think that in the expansion that we have done with our infrastructure in Old Town, we've brought up the water pressure so that it meets fire flow, so that we can have more business in those buildings. We've improved the sewers so that they can have more in those buildings. We have tried to do the things that cities can do to the best of our ability, and all we're hoping for is that lights a fire and helps us to grow. But I'm dedicated to helping the businesses that are here to expand, and whatever that takes, I want to help them do that.
All right, Nola Xavier is one of 3 candidates. She's the incumbent for Florence mayor. Joe Henry is a Florence city councilor who is running for mayor. Alan Burns is a former councilor and a former mayor who wants to, didn't you learn the first time? He's been away long enough, he's forgotten, I guess, maybe what it is. We've been talking an awful lot about your wife searching about economic development, and I want to go off the board here and throw one at you. City of Eugene, City of Springfield, Lane County are all considering possible taxes on marijuana if voters should approve Measure 91. Now, the council did impose a 1-year moratorium, and that's all you're limited. That's all you can do under state law is do a 1-year moratorium on medical marijuana dispensaries in the city of Florence. The state of Oregon says you got to allow them with certain restrictions. If voters approve Measure 91, legalize recreational use of marijuana, is this a source of revenue, and how large of a source of revenue do you think it would be? And let's go back with Nola Xavier.
Of course, this is all going to be decided by the courts. I think we all pretty much know that. But we have had our city attorney working on some proposed wording that we could adopt that will give us a placeholder, so to speak, in terms of a tax if that's allowed. We're taking those steps along with the other cities. We expect that will probably be handled at a workshop, very possibly this Monday night. If not, then certainly on the 20th. So it is on our agenda. It has been on our agenda for a while, and we're just waiting for the the drafts to come from the city attorney.
Do you think it would be a significant source of revenue, or would it be like Colorado was anticipating a great amount and only netted like one-fourth?
I don't see it as a significant source, because I think that for at least us on a city level, where, you know, in a big city it might be, but I don't see it as a significant source in Florence.
Alan Burns, taxing recreational pot.
I think it's the most foolish thing in the world.
Taxing it?
Yeah, because of the fact that, I mean, I've served several families that their family member got a tremendous amount of comfort from marijuana because of their illness.
The medical marijuana.
And medical marijuana, but if you're taxing that, why not the city tax cigarettes and alcohol? I mean, where do you stop it eventually? And if you start taxing that recreational or medical or whatever marijuana, if you start taxing that, it's going to be so high, like you said, Bob, in the state of Colorado, it is so high, it hasn't gotten rid of the pot on the street corners and this type of thing. That's just cheaper. So where do you think people are going to go to, and you're not going to get taxes out of that? It's not going to be, it's not fair, in my opinion, if you do one and then you have a state tax on alcohol, but no city tax there. And I wouldn't know marijuana from oregano, I guarantee you that, but still, where do you draw the line at? And I don't see one without the other.
I'm not coming to your house for spaghetti. Joe Henry, taxing recreational pot in the city of Florence, should voters approve it? Is that something to go, is it even worth looking at?
Well, the only buzzword at the LOC conference,
League of Cities,
economic development, was taxing marijuana.
Really?
Medical marijuana is here to stay, probably. The likelihood that we'll have recreational marijuana is fairly certain. Even if Measure 91 doesn't pass this year, it eventually is going to pass. There was an article in today's Register Guard about the Lane County supervisors all being in favor and leaning toward taxing marijuana, both medical and recreational. I have some philosophical issues with marijuana, some ethical ones. I would support putting the mechanism in place to tax it, as all these cities are rushing to do before the November election, because Measure 91 preempts cities from taxing marijuana. And the feeling is, maybe a desperate feeling, that if we get this code and legislation in place before the November election, that by some means the state will forgive that preemption and grandfather our ability to tax.
I have a question on that, though. The first thing I thought of is, if cities or the county put a tax on sales of recreational pot, well, that's illegal. How can you tax something that's not legal?
That's a good question, and actually they had the legal folks from the LOC there who said actually you can tax something that's legal. They used the example that Al Capone didn't go to jail for illegal activities. He went to jail for failure to pay his taxes on his illegal activities. So there you go.
All right, Joe Henry, thank you very much. Joe Henry, Nola Xavier, Alan Burns are all three candidates for Florence mayor. I want to jump real quick to the next question. We'll only have just a very quick time for a quick answer from each one of you on this one. And the first question, or the first person to answer this particular one, man, I'm trying to follow my. Will be Alan, or will be Joe Henry. Joe, you're the one that brought this up. The city needs to repair relationships with the Port of Siuslaw. It seems like, I don't know if it's been fractured, but there certainly appears to have been some sort of disconnect over the past couple of years. Is there a disconnect between the city and Port? And if so, what needs to be done to repair that?
Well, in my view, I know the Port manager fairly well, and I believe there is a serious disconnect between the city of Florence and the Port. And there's a number of issues that have created that I won't get into. What we need to do about it is, I mentioned earlier, forming partnerships with these other taxing authorities to get economies of scale in doing things and creating projects and completing projects in supporting economic development. These are how we would repair that relationship with the port. If I were elected mayor, I think the relationship would improve because I have a pretty good relationship with the port manager. So.
All right. Noah Xavier, is there a disconnect between the city and the Port of Stanislaus, and if so, what needs to be done to reconnect?
Well, I don't know that I would have put it in a manner of saying that there's a disconnect. We've had a couple of issues that have to do more with something that the port wanted to do that wasn't allowed by city code. And I think that they did some research to see if, as an independent agency, they had to follow city code. And as it turns out, yes, they do. And so I suppose that might be one of the things that Councillor Henry's referring to, but that's just part of doing business. I don't feel that there's a fracture in our relationship.
Do you think relationship could be better than what it is now?
Oh, I think that there are probably areas where we could work together, but they haven't approached us with that. They asked for a vacation on a piece of property that we didn't do. But other than that, I don't know why they would not feel that we would certainly be willing to be partners with them in a venture that involved both the city and the port. I would certainly be willing to do that.
All right. Alan Burns, what's your gauge of the relationship between the Port of Stanislaus and the city of Florence, and what needs to change?
I think over the last 30 plus years in any government, whether it's the port, the Cedar Water District, or the county, there's always been one time or another somebody claims there's a disconnect or relationships can be improved and this type of thing. I think there's always a time that relationships can be better. I think there's times that relationships have been worse, but I would like to say that I think everybody should be mature adults and not play high school anymore and get on with the business of taking care of the community. When it comes to relationships between the mayor and other elected officials, that's where it needs. I remember years ago that people claimed there was a relationship problem with us and the water district north of us, but the staff got along very, very well. It was just us elected officials that got territorial in this type of thing, but we all got together and got the projects done that was needed to be done. It basically took care of the community.
Does there need to be more face time between elected officials?
Oh, sure, always, in my opinion.
All right.
We all should get along and meet on a regular basis and just get along.
All right. Alan Burns is one of 3 candidates for mayor of City of Florence. Joe Henry and Noah Xavier are here. We have a break coming up here. We'll have national news coming up at the top of the hour, Coast Radio News, and after that, we will be bringing the 6 council candidates back, and folks in the audience will have a chance to ask everybody a question. During the break coming up, we're going to throw a bonus out there. You could tune in to channel 191 tomorrow evening beginning at 7 o'clock on Charter Cable, and Alan Campbell Productions will be replaying significant portions of this, if not all. And one of the bonus tracks you're going to hear when you tune in will be the question I'm going to pose the mayoral candidates here in just a minute about the fuel tax. And so you're going to have to tune in to 191 tomorrow night to hear the answers to that. ABC News is coming up at the top of the hour, Coast Radio News, tech trends, and more. And we'll be back with more Our Town City Council candidates until 7 o'clock. Come down and ask a question right here on Our Town. Perfect, Michael. Thank you. All right, so fuel tax. Let me ask the fuel tax, and who gets it first? Alan Burns. Same question I asked the council candidates. Yes, no, and if it's no, what do you propose to do in its place?
Fuel tax, the voters will have to decide, will be deciding that. On a personal level, I'm a little scared. I like whoever this council came up with the idea of this amount during the winter months, this amount during the summer months. I applaud. I think some creative accounting came with. I'm not scared of bonding if it does pass. The reason for it is the city of Florence has done bonding in the past and been very successful. Example, the building that we're all in right now. You know, there's project after project bonding. What scares me the most is whoever is on the council in the future, that they've talked about eliminating fees on the water bills. Whoever on the council is keep those fees off, because they can take a fee off today and agree, and the next year it'll be off, but it'll come a good stewardship of the elected officials to keep the fee off for future councils.
All right. Joe Henry, yes, no? If no, what alternative to paying for street repairs?
Well, unlike a number of council candidates, I got a yes and a no. I voted to place the fuel tax on the November ballot for two reasons. Number one, to spread it to a wider base, to have the people that are actually using our streets pay their fair share. The second reason is because of the inability of the city to maintain our streets under our current budgeting system. And this is basically where the agreement with the fuel tax stops. The city intends to use the revenue stream from this fuel tax to bond $5 million for 20 years, with payments approximately $390,000 a year. That's a total payback of $7.8 million. Somebody referred to it as a mortgage. Well, and then Clarence Lysdale referred to it as mortgaging our children's future. I have a number of concerns with the way that this idea came up. First off, the data, I am suspect of the data used to calculate the income stream, because 2 of the 6 service stations in town closed, as you know, recently, and I'm not sure whether it was taken before or after that. There's more and more emphasis on fuel economy and electric cars. What if a discount fuel center opens right outside of the city limits and takes half of the business out of town? And does anybody really believe that street repairs will last 20 years? If you do, go out and look at 126 that they just did a few years ago that's about due again. So are we going to borrow money for 20 years for something that may last 10?
But Joe, let me ask you, isn't aren't the projected collections pretty in relation to the bond, the $5 million bond? Aren't they pretty conservative? Because what is it, about 60% of the bond revenue is expected to go towards the tax revenue is to go to the bond repayment. So there's a bit of a cushion there for additional revenues after the initial $5 million repairs, isn't there?
Well, that may be conservative in that respect, but I think it's a lack of conservatism to think that the fuel tax is going to last for 20 years. How many things can go sideways in 20 years with a fuel tax?
And we may be all driving electric cars in 20 years.
We might all be driving electric cars.
All right.
I just have a problem with 20 years. Eugene passed a fuel tax a few years ago. They bonded for 5 years, and they reported very successful results from their fuel tax. Alan mentioned all these successful bonds. They didn't mention there's another one sitting out that we're paying on another failed project called the Spruce Street LID that the city quietly pays $93,000 a year in bond and interest payments.
And let's give Noel a chance to talk about the fuel tax and come back to that one right there, because I have that on the list of things to talk about. Thank you, Joe Henry. Noel Xavier, let's talk about the fuel tax real quick. Yes, no, if no, how do you propose to pay for street maintenance repairs?
Yes and yes.
Microphone, please.
Yes and yes. The fuel tax is the way to fix the streets. And we are one of the few cities in Linn County that doesn't currently have one. So when people say, well, they'll drive to Eugene to fill up, Eugene currently has a 5-cent all year round fuel tax. Coburg has 3, Cottage Grove has 3, Coquille has 3. If you receive a utility bill from the city of Florence, you got this in the mail today. which is a factual brochure about the fuel tax. And I say factual because we had to run that past the Secretary of State before we could produce it. Otherwise, you wouldn't be getting it. The reason for bonding is because when you look at that list of 23 projects and the cost of them, that's for the condition of the roads the way they are today at today's prices. If we try to pay as we go, the roads that we can't fix with the first 390,000 are going to be worse, and the cost is going to be more. And that will continue as we work our way through those 23 projects. If we use that money to do the bond, we will start the repair work and do it just as quickly as we can, given the window of opportunity for our weather and all, to get those roads fixed. The idea is to move them all into the good category. We're not looking for, we want to move them into the good category and then keep them there so that they don't get the way they are now. You look at Rhododendron Drive, and of course that's got to be one of the worst. That was an old county road that we inherited that wasn't ever built right to begin with.
Well, it was built to the standards in the 50s.
Well,
early
yes,
60s.
right, okay. So when we say, well, do we expect that roads last 20 years? If you give them proper maintenance and you have the money to do it on a regular basis, yes, they will last for 20 years and longer than 20 years. We have private roads in Florentine, which is over 20 years old, that we do a portion of those roads, maintenance on them every single year, and they're fine. They're fine. You just have to keep at it, but you've got to get them into the good shape first. And that's why the proposal is to do the bond and do it to fix the roads in the condition they're in now, at the price that today is, so that we can get that done, and not the amount. Councilor Henry talks about the interest we would pay. I think that we would pay at least that much more in worse conditions, having to do more work over the long period with the additional costs if we didn't do it that way.
So to kind of recap, what I'm hearing you say is if the streets are brought up to the level over the next couple of years through a large infusion of capital, then the rest of the money that will be coming in will be enough to maintain it. I want to move on to the Spruce Street LID because Joe Henry brought that up, and let's talk about that. It was a big issue. The council, you talked about it, whether to hold off on sending one of the large pieces to foreclosure in an effort to try to find a buyer for it. A buyer for that parcel has come in, and it was in the Register Guard today. I talked to Larry Patterson, the interim city manager, and he said the nearly $300,000 in back assessments on the largest piece of property in the Spruce LID have been paid, and the gentleman buying it will assume the other $600,000. Joe, what are your concerns? I mean, with that big chunk taken care of, and it doesn't look like it's in danger of going into foreclosure any longer. Are you comfortable with it now, or are you still concerned about it?
Well, I still have concerns. The big chunk of how much ever it was, $300 and some thousand.
Yeah, $287.
For the first time, brought us close to the point where the payments were current. There are still a number of parcels that benefited from that improvement that are not making their bond payments as they are contractually obligated to do. Therefore, because we put the full faith and credit of the city behind that bond, we're required to make those payments. And it's $93,000 a year for folks who choose not to pay. Now, the city had no intention to foreclose on the property, Bob. It was more like...
I just said there was discussion. Yeah.
Property was in foreclosure, but it was by the county for delinquent county taxes in the amount of $70,000. Earlier in the year, the city chose not to invest $70,000 to pay the delinquent taxes, which then we could have foreclosed our own lien and risked losing $830,000. So that's my concern.
Okay.
And the additional thing is that we're not taking any steps to recover the money from the people that are not making their payments when we could legally do that.
So with the amount of money that's been paid just this month, that certainly pays back the city for some of the payments, but the city is still paying out more each year than they're collecting in assessments on that local improvement district, right?
Absolutely.
All right. Nola, let's talk about that a little bit, broader
Yes.
context. I mean, are you comfortable with how it's turning out now?
Well, part of this goes back to this, the second part of the question that Teresa asked earlier about housing.
Yeah.
That lid went in there.
Local Improvement District, LID.
To open that property up, to get the infrastructure up there so that development could take place in that property. Now, one of the big developers started building houses out there, and they were affordable houses that were being built out there. And the way that he's portioned out his part of the lid payments is he's assigned so much of it, about a little over $9,000 to each lot. As each lot has sold, he does make that payment. Yes, he is in arrears, but he does make that payment. If we were to have workers come into town, we would have builders build those houses out, and that would solve both of those problems. But the other portion of that, about 13% of that, is that 17 acres that would have been Cannery Station that was owned by Our League Corporation. Well, they had been current on theirs until recently. They're now like 11 months behind on their payment. But Our League went into bankruptcy. Both
Right.
Miss Michi and Suzanne have passed away, and that company is in disarray. They have, however, renewed their permits, so they are still trying to make that work. And so I'm hopeful that it's all going to work out.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to pause real quick before Alan gets a chance to do this, and I'm going to send a message back. Michael, run break 6 immediately following this. Run break 6 immediately following this. Michael, run break 6. Alan Burns, the LID.
Well, I concur with Councilor Henry and Mayor Xavier. I have no problem with the money will be there when lots are sold. Our daughter, my wife and our daughter bought one of the first houses out there and paid her fair share for that home, and that went back to the LID and so forth. When lots are sold, they will, the previous councils have allowed them that when lots are sold, we get our recuperated money. Councilor Henry did bring up a good point that we are making the payments, but the money will come in. It may not come in as fast as.
But isn't there still a danger that there might be? I mean, what if we go back into recession, or?
Then I would say, Bob, you're looking at the glass always as half empty versus half full. There's always the government that you could always look at it half.
Yeah. All right.
I choose to look at it half.
All right. Thank you, Alan Burns. I'm going to ask the. All right. And can we have the 6 council candidates come back up? Thank you very much. Alan Burns, Joe Henry, Nola Xavier, and I'm going to bring 3 more chairs out. And if you would like to ask a question, I'd ask you to come to one of the microphones down here on each side and stand and be ready. And council candidates, mayor candidates, if we have time, I'm going to let you pose a question as well. So if you have a question you'd like to ask, come forward right now and I'll call on you. Thank you. And it's time for the 3rd hour of our town. I'm Bob Snedden. Welcome back. We are at the Florence Event Center where, you know what, we have all of our business taken care of. So we have 45 uninterrupted minutes to ask questions. It will go very quickly. We have 6 council candidates, 3 mayoral candidates. Rejoining us on stage right now is Ron Preisler, Clarence Lysdale, Susie Lacer, Mildred Rowley, George Liddon, Shane Burnham, And of course, they're joining Nola Xavier, Joe Henry, and Alan Burns. And first up to ask a question is potentially the only carryover on the Florence City Council, depending on how the mayor's race goes, come January. So, Joshua Green, you have a question, sir. First of all, thank you for joining us this night. Thanks for the question. Now, let's hear the question.
Thank you for doing this, and thank you everybody for being here, and thank you for the Chamber for working together, getting this done. It's terrific that we're taking this and taking it out to the public. In the 2 years that I've been on the council, one of the things I've learned, particularly going to things like the LOC conferences, is the trend in government today is partnership, and it's driven by vision. Communities have to have a dialogue and a conversation to decide what might be the direction to go in. Not to get into my personal point of view of what that answer is, my question is, are all of you going to be willing to work together and have that conversation with the public and amongst ourselves so that we can present the community with a plan and an idea that then we can deliver to other intergovernmental entities and try to raise money and make Florence work. The big box, the economic development, is not working, and we know why. We've discussed it. It's the job, it's the housing. There are some facilities that are out there, but we've got to think about what can be a true economic generator for small businesses and using the buildings that we already have on 101 and in Old Town. And some of the things that we've talked about tonight need to be connected to a vision and a plan. And we have to have that conversation. So I ask you to just speak to that, please.
So speak to how well you're going to play in the sandbox of the
How
city
well
council.
are we going to play in the sandbox, and how far out of the box are we willing to look? And are we all willing to discover what might be the right solution for Florence?
All right, we're going to start on this side and just go right down the line. So Mildred Rowley, if you would just, how are you going to play well with the others?
Well, I look forward to that opportunity to play well with the council and the other members, City Hall, because we're all a team. And I do think, as the interim city manager stated, that we as a council are to be the ears, the eyes, and the voice of the community. In order to do that, we have to really work together, communicate with each other, and communicate with our citizens. And I think, as Joshua was saying, really reach out to the county, local, the county government, federal government, state government here to see what is available and what are the grants, where is the help that can come to sustain this beautiful community.
All right.
So I do think it's team playing.
All right, Shane Burnham, how would you work with fellow councilors and the mayor if you were elected?
Well, I'm known as a big communicator anyways. I think one of the big things that when we think about team players and working together, we think everybody gets along, but I like to think of conflict. Because when you have conflict, that means not everybody thinks the same. Not everybody's just, keeping quiet. They're willing to speak their ideas and throw them out there and understand that good ideas come from conflict. Good resolutions come from conflict. So I look forward to that.
That's how you handle that conflict.
It is, and it's not about pointing fingers or saying, hey, you never play nice, but it's about looking at the problem, having the conversations, dealing with the ideas, and then making a decision and making something work the best idea.
And I apologize for wandering around. I'm used to being in radio and nobody can see what I'm doing. So, I think the majority of us here, we've shown that. We've got a track record of being team players. That's not a question. Intergovernmental agencies dealing with other people like the port, that's important. We can't overlook those things, and we need to make a valiant effort to not just be available, but to knock on their door. That's important. I've said, before, I've been a business here in town for 6 years. Nobody from City Council's knocked on my door, and I think that's a fault that we have. We need to be aggressive in pursuing, and not just saying, hey, we're happy to see you, or how can we help you, but going and knocking on the door and saying, hey, we have this method, this resource in place to help you, let us do it. So we need to be aggressive. All right, Noel Xavier, getting along with other council members.
I think that it all starts with respect. If you respect each other, then you're free to have those conversations where you don't agree, and you can work out the problems. And that collaboration frequently brings about a solution that neither you nor they thought about, but one that works better than what you might have come up with to begin with. But it starts with respect. And I also think that it is extremely important to reach outside our own little cocoon in Florence, which is why I've tried so hard in the years that I've been on the council to make good associations with the county, with our state representative, with our state senator, so that I can ask them those questions and find out what's going on, which helps us to be able to make better decisions on the local level.
Alan Burns, cooperation on the council.
I'll keep it short. I always have and will continue to do, and my philosophy and my motto has always been, it takes us all to make the one. We're all here.
I want to relate just a real quick story while you're in with the microphone there. Roger McCorkle was mayor, I think it was around 1993, 1994. And a relatively new city councilor came away from a council meeting, and there had been a 4-to-1 vote or a 3-to-2 vote, and that new councilor was a little concerned that it wasn't unanimous. And what was Mayor McCorkle's response to you, Alan?
It happens. It happens.
But it's how you deal with that, isn't it?
It's how you deal with it. I was the lone no.
Yeah. Ron Chrysler?
I think I mentioned I've been on a number of boards. I'm also president of my HOA.
Excuse me, Ron, if you could speak directly into the end of it there.
I'm also president of my HOA. Those of you who belong to HOAs, you know they don't always go very smoothly. When I took charge of the HOA, it was a very contentious situation. In the time that I've been there, it is now a group that works together to solve all problems. That's what we need to do, communicate, listen to each other, and come to joint solutions. I don't know that you're going to have 100%. I'll settle for the majority. I would like more, but in order to get things done, you need a majority.
Ron, let me ask you a question in that regard. If you wind up in the one no vote in a 4-to-1 majority, is it your responsibility to step on board and support that, or do you continue to say it was my decision?
I would have to say it's a good question, and it would depend upon my values. If it was something that went against something that I believed in, I wouldn't join.
Okay. All right. George Liddon?
Thank you. To work in a group and a team, you check your emotions at the door. This isn't about us, this is about you folks. We're here to put together a process that's going to be successful to develop infrastructure, the economic development that you all need. Again, we check our emotions at the door. If we don't have 100% vote, everybody in total agreement, like Alan said, that's life. If you have 100% all the time, then there's something wrong. And so you just, you follow the leader, you put in your input that you've received from the citizens, and you don't make it an emotional decision.
All right, Joe Henry, getting along with others.
First, I want to thank Joshua for that question. That was a great question, Joshua. It almost sounds like you were campaigning.
He's just keeping in practice.
Having worked in an environment where I was responsible for 350 branches with 1,200 employees, you can imagine I've had some experience with team building. I have not felt a real close sense of teamwork on the council since I've been on it for the last 2 years. Joshua and I both came on the council at the same time, and we have experienced that 4-to-1 vote numerous times. I think we have continued, though we didn't agree, to support the views of the council. Looking forward, I am impressed, and I want to thank this group of candidates that showed up here today. They almost did our job for us. We really didn't have many questions left to answer. But they seem to be very open-minded, very progressive, have some good ideas, and I think it's just the fact that there are 9 candidates running for 4 open positions should say something about the fact that many, many people in our community think that it's time for a change.
Susie Leiser, getting along. And before Susie talks, I see Bruce Jarvis is ready to ask a question. Is that right, Bruce? And if anybody else in the audience would like to come forward to one of the microphones so that we know that you're ready to go. So Susie Leiser, working together if you're elected.
By nature, I am a collaborator. I currently serve on the City Public Library District Board, so as far as interagency local collaboration, we have a natural fit going there. As part of my service with the Library Board, I am the LCOG, Lane Council of Government Representative, so again, I have countywide connections through that avenue. I also worked at the Port of Sayusla for over 6 years, so I have a pretty good background and connections there as well. The other part of Joshua's question he mentioned was to a community vision. And I see that as actually one of the things that is missing right now in our community is coming together under a common vision. And there are certainly ways to address that. One of the things is already in progress, and if those listening aren't aware of it, I'll spread the news right now.
You're going to talk about pathways.
I am. Is that okay?
Yes, absolutely.
The Ford Institute does a variety of leadership trainings. Many in our community have taken part in that class. A group of those alumni have currently formed a GO team here, and they have applied for a grant and been awarded it for a Pathways to Community Vitality program. As part of that, they are just today launching a community-wide survey. So if you have not received it, you can certainly contact me or any members of the GO team and fill out this short little online survey. This is collecting information on what's important to our residents. Where do we want to go in the future? The results of the survey will be followed up with short meetings and then an action plan. So this is a great way to come together and identify our community vision.
So what you're saying is more than just coming together as 4 councilors and a mayor, but the entire community coming together and working together. Clarence Lysdale, if you're elected, how are you going to work with the other ones that are up here with you?
Well, I did spend quite a bit of time on the Planning Commission and through some fairly contentious kind of issues, if you remember, 10 to 12 years ago in total. And I don't think there's any problem with cooperation among this group of people. I think that I have a concern whether we'll be able to identify with the current environment, the millennials, the social networking. I don't see anyone here with the exception of Shane that's in that frame of mind. And I think maybe some of the things that we're going to try to do will cause us to have to get in that frame of mind. And it's going to take a little doing on my part, and everyone else will attempt to join me.
I don't want to make any judgments or anything, but I think Shane is probably the only one up here that has not seen his 25th high school reunion yet. This year, okay. Not that that's a good thing or a bad thing. Bruce Jarvis, you have a question. Thank you, Joshua, for the question. It's very good, very enlightening. So, Bruce Jarvis.
Thank you, Bob, and thanks to the Chamber of Commerce for putting this on and for all you candidates being here. I heard repeatedly economic development, and I understand that this is important. I also understand that a real large chunk of our community is either bald or gray, and we're retired.
Some of us both.
Some of us both.
2 out of 3.
Only one person, Alan Burns, mentioned keeping the feeling of a small town community and finding ways to support that. And that is a major concern for me as I look to see who I'm going to vote for.
All right, so keeping the small town, and Alan, since you were singled out in that, why don't you give us the first response? And can I, Bruce, how would you anticipate doing some of the other things we've talked about in the economic development around, but keeping that small town feel? Is that okay? So how would you propose to maybe keep that small town feel?
Well, it was as far as jobs. I won't use right now the economic development word. But jobs, there is, and effort, there is a need in the community through the chamber, through to keep the small townness that, I mean, I remember in 1987, my wife and I came here. You could have shot a cannon kind of down off Bay Street. Not a lot of people would have heard it. And
you would have had a few people helping you, though.
Yeah, or taking, before the port put their parking lot in, we had homeless people in the blackberry bushes that, you know, took showers and this type of thing. So there's need, but jobs, there is an element, there is businesses in the city of Florence and outside the city of Florence that could stand to improve, to relocate, to move, to improve or to learn. There was, if you remember, Dr. Jarvis, a committee that the chamber put on as far as hospitality training that helped a lot of the businesses to just what Mayor Zager talked about. If somebody came to the city of Florence and asked a question, where to send them versus ignore them or just put them off. There was that. It's been discussed out there, and it is, if there is a need that the public wants, there is a group of people that's talking about building on the arts, film festivals, the dance, making Florence more of a, besides a tourist destination for fishermen like we're experiencing now in Old Town, but also being a destination for the arts like other communities on the Oregon coast is. And a lot of those things do happen from people with ideas and groups. They come to the city, Boys and Girls Club, the event center. It's a core people who have a need, who have wants, and it comes about. And I think anything, we're capable of doing anything. And with that comes jobs, I feel.
Okay. Ron Chrysler, how do you keep the small town feel? Oh, yes. Alan's not working very well with you.
It just happened this past weekend. My grandkids were in town, and we took them dune buggy riding. Now that's the first time I've been on a dune buggy ride. I'm ashamed to admit that. But the people sitting next to me were tourists, and they said, I can't believe this. For $15 that we're getting a ride in the dunes that lasted, I think, well over an hour, and they were exposed to the guide teaching them about how the dunes are created and what a beautiful environment it was. To me, our lakes and our rivers are part of the joy of living in Florence, and we need to promote those things and yet keep a small town. I mean, that type of industry, yeah, it is still tourist-based industry, but it will create more jobs. Some of those jobs will be better paying than minimum wage. I can guarantee you that the driver of that vehicle had been driving for at least 8 years, and I don't think he was making minimum wage. If I'm the owner of that business, I don't want somebody without experience that's driving an expensive vehicle and putting people in danger. So I think those areas will work. I'm a little bit concerned about trying to compete with Newport with technology. We're going to have the University of, the State University opening a branch in Newport. They're going to be doing small business growth there as well, using the cable. They've got the professors to work with kids one-on-one. Maybe we can compete with some of that and bring some of it to Florence because of the quality of life that we can offer. It certainly would be a better environment if you like small town living. But I question how to get large businesses here to Florence and get them to stick.
Okay. George Liddon, how do you do that? How do you attract a large employer as Ron Chrysler maybe just mentioned, but still be able to walk down Bay Street in Old Town Florence and be able to say hi and recognize many of the people that you see. Keep that small town feel.
That's a tall order. Number one, you need to determine what the need of a business is that will be relocated here. And then fill that need. That's a success parameter for any business startup. Number two, we need to decide on what theme Florence wants to maintain. Are we a retirement community? Are we a growth community? Are we a stable community that wants to grow just a little bit? If that is the case, architectural control might be something to look at. For example, Santa Fe, New Mexico. You look at the businesses, from a distance, they're almost invisible. You can look at it, and they blend into the mountain, into the sides. Sisters, you go across the mountain. Sisters has a theme, and they're drawing a huge amount of tourists going through there with their Western theme. If we came up with a theme, found the need from an outside company, kept the architecture to fit that need, we could grow without having the dominance of large buildings. For example, the 40 acres up on Kingwood that the port wants to sell, if that were developed into an office park or a call center, it could be developed with the environment where maybe it was no more than 2 stories, but it was just laid out in kind of a campus type setting that if you drove by, you probably wouldn't even know it was there. That could be done. If we kept that theme, we could grow and not impact the maintaining a small community.
George Liddon, let me just follow up real quickly. I'm not hearing you say that's the only way, but I'm hearing you say architecture could be one way of keeping a small town feel.
That would keep the feel, yes.
All right. Joe Henry, keeping the small town feel of Florence. That's what attracted many of you folks here on stage to this community, and has kept others of us here. How do you maintain that while doing the business of city government and growing and doing whatever?
Bruce, I'm a little bit like you. A little bit gray. And like you, when we moved here 15 years ago, you could go to the old theater downtown and be the only person sitting there and start the movie when you got there. It's not like that today. Part of that small town feeling has already gone away, but I don't think economic development is the culprit. And Ryan and Cindy, don't take this wrong, but I think maybe the Chamber's done a little bit too good a job in driving tourism, because especially in the summertime, it takes 15 minutes to get across town because of the traffic. And so I'm not sure how much more of that do we want and still maintain the small town atmosphere. I don't believe that generating 100 or 200 family wage jobs where people can move here, buy a home, and raise their family will detract from the small town atmosphere. I, like you, or many of you in the audience, am retired, live on a fixed income. My problem with the lack of economic development is the fact that those tourists come through and avail themselves of our services. Other than the transient room tax, they don't share the cost that we bear that continually escalate. When I moved here, my water bill was $35 a month, and now it's $105. And it isn't just that, it's every bill you open, every fee, every taxing authority is sitting around looking for ways to come up with additional tax and fees. That's part of the small town environment, is being here on a fixed income, being able to afford to live here, and not be taxed and feed no matter what. So again, I don't think generating 100 or 200 family wage jobs is the issue when it comes to maintaining a small town atmosphere. I think we have to, again, I'll keep getting back to this, we need some professional help in economic development. How we do that is another issue. I don't know how far we're going to go with this. But
Yeah. Let's continue on down the line with the question about maintaining that small town feel. Susan Lacer, what can we do to maintain the small town feel? And I'm going to throw in an additional part to that is, what is a small town feel?
I think what determines a small town feel probably is up to the individual. But to address Bruce's question, I think one of the essential aspects for us growing our economic development efforts is in maintaining and increasing our livability in our town. I think Florence is a pretty livable town now, but there is certainly room for improvement, and I think by increasing our livability, we will attract businesses, and specifically we'll attract businesses who want that small town livable feel that we have here already. So that would be where I would urge the city and the chamber and all of the entities involved to work on trying to develop businesses who come here because we have this small town feel, because we are a livable community. And livability embraces a lot of different aspects: arts, schools, recreation, entertainment, commerce, transportation. Having walking and biking paths, I think, is one really excellent way to improve our livability, continue it and improve it. And that gets people out literally face to face talking to each other. So I live near the 12th Street path, and I run into people every day when I'm on that. So it's a great opportunity to visit with your neighbors, say hi, how's the dog, you know, all those things. So I think livability and economic development can work hand in hand.
Clarence Lysdale.
Well, I would agree with Susie. I think that the town has a great rapport among the people that are here, and I don't think that adding reasonable economic activities, be they small businesses or additional tourism at different times of the year, is going to affect that. I think it's up to us to maintain the livability, and I think we're doing it. I don't think that the infusion of some additional economic activity is going to change that. It's a great little town, and it'll stay that way as long as we're positive about the whole thing and look forward to the next day.
Mildred Rowley, what is the importance of small town feel?
I think the importance of the small town for any resident is to feel their roots are here. And part of the roots are connection with your neighbor, with nature. And we certainly have the neighbors and friendliness. And we have the nature that welcomes us, whether it's the ocean, the little lakes, the rivers. It's just there for us. And the vegetation that we're also bonded to. So I think that we're not going to have, we don't want to recruit a Walmart. We have the casino, that's enough of a general employment institution. And we do need to attract the arts. I think we have an excellent model, Ashland. Ashland is a city, owns all the theaters. And yes, they made their mistakes. They own the ski resort that has no snow, but it averages out. So I think, yes, and you get that small town feeling there because of the love of the park, the trees, the buildings. There's a community feeling just like that we have here. So we have a great model if we want to look at. In fact, the handout that came from the interim city planner was written that he handed us, and most people that visited, he handed out his address to the councilman of Ashland. And for them, the most important thing was to be, again I'm saying, to be those ears, eyes, and the voice of the people. So I think we don't have to worry about attracting, say, tourism. We take care of the residents. And I think with what Joshua being mentioned, that we reach out to the arts. We have the natural beauty here. And we can support young families. As Joe was talking about, that if we had 200 families in here and, you know, young families, because we are top heavy. And I'm part of the top heavy. I'm 67, but I'm still working and love it. Not all the time working, but enough time so I can be running for city council. And my science background, I lived a lot of places. We don't have any chemical dumps to deal with, like Love Canal. We have really natural beauty here, and we're sustainable when you look at us, and we want to keep it that way.
All right.
And polish.
Hilda Rowley says we still have it. Before Shane, to Shane Burnham, but Shane, before you do that, I see somebody ready for a question, so we have another question. And probably going to be the last question from the audience based on the time, because we have about 14 minutes till 7 o'clock. Shane Burnham, small town feel.
Well, small town is what brought us here. You know, I have 4 kids. I had a lengthy commute before we moved here. I like being able to commute 1 to 2 minutes to get to my work, to go up to the school and have lunch with my kids, to show up if there's a problem. You know, those are things I value. And I think that keeping a small town feel involves 2 things. Number 1, vision. You have to keep small town and community in your vision. And you do that by constantly keeping it on the forefront when you're developing plans. You know, your architectural designs, your direction is small town feel, not, you know, mammoth box store. So we can do it in lots of different ways. The other part of that is, I think, keeping that sense of community. You know, I'm heavily involved in our community. I have a church here that I'm a part of. We're doing building projects. I work with youth. You know, and I think when I walk down the street, I don't go anywhere in this town I don't run into somebody that I know. And part of being, you know, a part of the community is getting out and doing things. So I think that's important. We want to keep the feel, but we also want to keep the community. You know, since I've moved here, we've lost 2 gas stations, we lost a KFC, we lost a movie theater one time, which wasn't the first time, I think. You know, and hopefully it's not the last, but we've lost a lot of things, and I think, you know, we want to keep that small town feel. We're in danger of becoming microscopic at this point, because we can't support the people that are growing here. You know, if my kids can't stay here, the population decreases by 4 instantly. And then eventually when they find a place to settle and they have kids, I'm probably going to move closer because I want to be near them. And I value my family. I value relationships. And, you know, I want to see this keep a small town feel, but I also want to see it sustain, you know, be able to sustain families. Again, I don't want to see box stores moving here. I don't think that's the answer. I want to see small businesses where we have somebody locally going, hey, we have a need, and I can make this happen. I can fill this because city government works with me and enables me to do it. So we grow that way.
All right, Shane Burnham, thank you very much. Last word on this topic, Nola Xavier.
I think that, one, I want to congratulate the Chamber for bringing tourists into town, because I think we've got to get people here before we have people move here, because they need to see what we have to offer. And one of the ways that that happens is when they come through town because of an event that the Chamber is staging or something along those lines. I know that my first exposure to Florence was as a tourist, and I saw what I thought looked wonderful and came back and looked again and again. But secondly, I think that Old Town is very key to what gives us our identity. The historic buildings and the feeling that you get as you walk down those streets. And I think that that's extremely important, and that's why one of the first projects that Urban Renewal did was give out 37 small grants to businesses in Old Town to do whatever it was that they needed to do to spruce up their buildings, to paint or put in flower boxes or awnings or things that just made it look fresh, so that it changed the face in terms of showing that we have civic pride in this very special place in Old Town. And I think that when we talk about building on an identity, that Old Town is our identity. We have a gem there, and we need to protect it and respect it and use that as a showcase for what else we do in this town. Because every town needs a hook or a brand that says, this is Florence. And for us, I think that is Old Town, and that's what we need to really put some concentration on, so that we can promote that feeling of a small, exciting town that is inviting to people who want that kind of atmosphere.
All right, Nola Xavier, thank you very much. We're coming up on about 8.5 minutes away. Did you have a question, sir? And if you would just, I should know your name, I apologize, but if you would just tell us your name.
My name is Eric Leitch. My company is the recently new owner of C&M Stables.
Okay.
I can tell you that the people that come in, and there are thousands, that have come in to enjoy our Ocean Coast adventure, do a whole lot more than support the room tax. Our customers come in, they shop in the stores, they eat in the restaurants, they support this community. The question that I would like to ask, and the last two candidates have touched on this. We've talked about economic development. That's the main theme of this 3 hours. Talked about trying to bring businesses in from outside into the community. Talked about trying to have businesses that are already in the community grow. As candidates, what's your view on the priority of the businesses that are already here and helping them to survive, in contrast to the effort you put into having businesses grow or bring others from the outside? Do you recognize the need to help the existing businesses survive and prosper?
All right, thank you, Mr. Leitch, very good. We have 5 minutes, 9 candidates, 30 seconds, be really quick. Joe Henry, could you start this one off? Give me 30 seconds. So what's more important? Existing business growing, prospering, bringing somebody in from out of the area? Is that the essence of it? Yeah, okay. 30 seconds.
I believe they're both extremely important. Count, I apologize if I left you out. I was talking about the chamber. You've done a great job. And I didn't mean to slight tourism because, yes, they do support.
Joe, could you talk into the microphone?
Oh, maybe it's not on.
Yeah,
it is on.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think we can do both. I think we need to generate the family wage jobs to help stabilize the economy so that we have the income stream throughout the year.
Okay. I'm hearing you say simple answer is they're both important, but stabilize things. Susie Lacer, very quickly.
My main priority would be our existing businesses to help them survive and thrive, and followed by that, seeking businesses who want to come move here and enjoy our town.
Right. Clarence Lysdale.
Well, we've got to support the current businesses, and I think good support of the current business reflects in the possibility of additional business.
So that would assist in recruitment efforts, you're saying. Mildred Rowley.
Oh, I think support the roots that are here, and again, it's one of attraction. And then that attraction will promote other businesses to follow, and if we have that communication with the chamber and other business people that are already rooted here, I think that will be attraction.
All right, Shane Burnham.
Priority would be the existing businesses because we don't want to lose ground, essentially. But the close second to that would be developing new businesses. You know, I like the idea of economic gardening and helping our businesses that are here. But, you know, truthfully, if we all gardened and only had one vegetable in our crop, we would get tired of it. So we need to branch out. We need to get some more vegetables in our garden, so to speak.
All right, Nola Xavier. Good analogy.
Our existing businesses have got to be our #1 priority. They've been here supporting this city all along through our ups and our downs, and we owe that to them. And then, when they're stable and doing well, comes the opportunity to expand and grow. And I would prefer to do it by helping them to expand and grow.
Mr. Lee?
Oh, sorry.
I believe wholeheartedly in supporting local business. When I've been on the council before, I have personally witnessed and been on the short end of a 4-1 vote over $100 where previous councils have purchased cars from Eugene because they were $100 cheaper than here in Florence. You take care of your locals and take care of your own first.
Ron Presley.
I would agree you have to take care of your locals first. I think in our community we have a great, as somebody mentioned earlier, a great art community. We need to help unify and show that art community as a drawing point for Florence.
All right, and George Liddon.
if we don't take care of the locals, they dry up, the city collapses. They are the lifeblood and support of this town. They should be supported priority number one.
All right. Thank you all. You may have noticed we're almost out of time, and I did not give you a chance to do closing statements, but I think you all got a great opportunity to interject your feelings as we went through the questions. I'd like to thank you all for joining us this night. Thank you for the questions that came from Teresa Bear. Thank you for your questions this evening as well. Alan Campbell Productions, has been recording it. It will be on channel 191 of Charter Cable beginning at 7 p.m. tomorrow night. You can check the listings on that. But I'd like to thank Ron Preisler and Clarence Lysdale. They are the two candidates for the 2-year term. Thank you, gentlemen, for coming in tonight. We have 4 candidates for the 4-year council: Susie Lacer, Mildred Rowley, George Liddon, and Shane Burnham. Thank you all for coming in. And the 3 candidates for mayor: Noah Xavier, Joe Henry, and Alan Burns. I'd like to, let's give them a round of applause and make it sound loud. Thank you all for coming. Now the big challenge is in a small town, if let's talk about the small town feel, is you may know all 9 of these. If you don't, the chances are good you're going to know all 9 of them by the time November 4th rolls around. Ballots will be mailed on the 15th of October, and you'll have until the evening of the 4th to get them back. I would encourage you to not base your selections just on this evening's conversation. Hopefully this has been very helpful to you, but do some more investigation and talk to these folks and find out how they think about things. Thanks to Michael Simmons back at the studio for keeping us on the air. Thanks to Cal Appleby and Brian Castleman, Florence Area Chamber of Commerce, and all the candidates and the folks here at the Florence Event Center. ABC News is coming up next, and Coast Radio News is after that. Let me say that again. ABC News is coming up next. There it is. And then Coast Radio News. No Coast Radio News. Gosh, Harley Youngblood will take us to midnight. November 5th will be the next Our Town. I'll be talking about the 50th anniversary of Lane Community College. Thank you all for listening and joining us here at the Florence Event Center. Thank you very much.